Yeah, you are. Did you have an injection or something?
No, I'm just, between rehab and that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 5:30, and I will call this special work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. If the clerk will please note that all city council members are present. Thank you. Our work sessions are very informal, so we go directly to our agenda, but I want everybody to know that we're still in COVID environment, and tonight's meeting is being conducted both in person and online. All of our city council members are in the council chambers as well as our staff, and we're all practicing social distancing. Members of the public may attend in person if they like. Otherwise, the public can watch this meeting online at burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast Channel 16 or 859. The public can also still participate through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join or by calling 651-372-8299. More information is available on our meetings webpage and in the council agenda packet. Please note that there is an audio delay if you are watching us on TV or online. So if you speak, please mute your video broadcast first. If Zoom meeting attendees experience audio issues, we ask you to leave the meeting and log back in. This usually solves the problem. Okay. The first item on our agenda this evening is a resolution to award the sale of our GO Bond Series 2020A and reallocating certain proceeds of the GO Tax Abatement, Improvement, and Utility Bond Series 2018A to the Fire Station Number 1 Replacement Project. And presenting this item this evening is our Finance Director, Jenny Rohde. And good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. This morning, we sold bonds at 10:30 this morning. The sale closed, and we had good results. Three bids were received, and the bonds consist of financing for the improvement portion to fund the construction of the fire station, annual street improvements for 2020 projects, and also the city annually issues bonds for the special assessment portion of street projects, so that's what that street improvement portion is for. Annually, we also we look for refunding opportunities on our existing debt, and this bond issue also includes refunding of the city's 2010D improvement bonds. So that's what's included in the bond sale. We received 3 bids this morning, and the low bid, the true interest cost on that is 1.6267, so it's very good results. And the refunded savings on the debt service costs for the refunding issue will be a net present value benefit of $104,823. Also, the low bid included a premium of $941,823. So we were able to reduce the total principal amount of the bonds to $18,515,000. So it's a very, very good result. Additionally, included in this item is another resolution, and this is really more of a housekeeping item. We did have some remaining proceeds on our 2018A abatement bonds that we issued for an improvement project on the Ice Center roof. And this second resolution that's included in your packet just allows us to apply that remaining proceeds to the cash portion of the fire station project. So.
Okay.
But the resolution, that's the second resolution included in that item. And I stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Rohde? No, 1.6 and 3 bidders.
3 bidders.
Can you tell? I didn't hear you. Who was the lowest bidder?
Piper Sandler and Company.
Oh, good.
So,
Okay.
And the bids were quite close together. I think the high bid was 1.6546, so the interest rates were all very close together. So.
Okay. Very good. Members of the council, if you don't have any questions for Ms. Rohde, then I would entertain a motion, please, to adopt both resolutions.
Move to approve?
Okay, Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Thank you. That's great. So, I was trying to find the email that you sent about the bonds. Yeah. You did not tell us that we got confirmed for our AAA.
Yes, we did get confirmed for AAA. That is also great news.
Good for the people to know.
Yes,
It's an
yes.
important thing.
Sorry.
Okay. So we held it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's good news.
Okay, so that's great. All right, now we move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is our department budget presentations. So, Melanie.
Madam Mayor and Council, we've had a tradition of asking our department heads, our senior leadership team, to do a brief presentation on their departments ahead of the budget. And so tonight we have our 6 department heads, and I would look to Greg, he's going to queue up the presentation for us. As you know, we've been working through this budget for a couple months now. It's an iterative process as we deal with COVID and the continuing uncertainty of that. What we've asked our staff to do tonight is tell a story. Tell a story about what the services are that we're providing that make Burnsville a better place. And so everything that we do ties back to our vision and our values and our strategic priorities. And so what you'll see tonight will be an illustration of that. And I'll turn it over to
Jenny is first up.
Jenny. Jenny, are you our first one? Do you have that?
I'm waiting for the presentation.
It's coming.
It's
Okay.
coming. I can get started from memory.
What?
I can do that.
If
I
you
don't
want,
have the
Jenny, we'll get
presentation
started and then
printed,
we'll
but
queue up our slides. Thank you.
yeah, well, he does that. Once upon a time, there was a department.
It's a story, right?
I'm supposed to tell a story and keep
Yeah.
you awake, not have you
Make
fall
sure it has
asleep.
a happy ending, please.
Yeah, that's who goes last.
And let me also say, because, those mics don't carry very, so everybody use your outside voice, please, so we can hear you.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
How's that? I'm going to talk about community development, so thank you very much. And we're going in alphabetical order by department. It's random that way. Looking forward to 2021, hopefully what I'm going to say will not be a surprise to you. You know what's going on, the directives that you've given. If it is a surprise, we need to have a conversation after the meeting because I've not communicated clearly to you what we're doing. So with that, we have 3 priority items that we are focusing on into 2021 as part of our budget. The first item gets to our economic development strategic plan. This is, you all have this, we adopted this 2 years ago, almost to the day.
Yep.
This plan, it's on our website for anyone who's watching. And what this document is really the priority plan for the future of the city as far as economic development, community development, city planning. There's 5 priorities in here that I'll just highlight as part of this. Center Village, and what we're working on next year is completing the AUAR, which is the environmental review portion. One of the steps needed to kind of set the table for development, so the development community doesn't have to take 6 months or a year to do their own environmental analysis. We're going to do this at the onset, so that's done. Our goal number 2 has to do with partnering, working on the image of the school and the community. We will continue those partnerships. We were at our CVB annual meeting this last week, and we talked about the image of the community, and the general sentiment from the folks in the room, a dozen community leaders, was that the city has made some headway in this area. So we will continue to do that. That was positive news to hear. Continue work with Heart of the City, and what's going on next year with Heart of the City? Well, the Orange Line will be open next year. We will have our TOD implementation in place, and then all the entitlement has been done for the Chase apartment building on Nicollet Plaza. So we've got kind of 3 important things we know that it will happen, and of course, when you think what was going to happen this year and look back, it was a lot different. Hopefully, we'll have those things and more that will happen in 2021 in Heart of the City. Goal number 4 of the strategic plan has to do with housing and commercial program awareness. We've just started that work with the Economic Development Commission. There's some exciting things, I think, that will be coming before you at the joint work session in January. We're looking at how we can improve our housing stock and the awareness. What tools do we need in the toolbox to meet this goal from our ED strategic plan? And lastly, is keep our focus on Burnsville as a regional destination, and that has to do a lot with the marketing. We've done a lot with that and creating our brand last year, implementing our marketing initiatives. We now have a community engagement coordinator at the city that can also help with some of this larger branding. We have the You Belong Here and a lot of stuff that economic development and community development staff are doing with our business community to continue to promote our brand and partnerships. So that's kind of looking forward on the ED strategic plan item. Next slide. There we go. And then initiative or priority number 2 that we'll be working on, city code updates. This is a major overhaul of the city code that will be starting in 2021. As far as community development goes, this has to do with a lot of the land use and the regulations that impact our businesses and our residents. Specifically, we talk about Title IV, our building regulations, and you're familiar with this, building and fire codes. We can't change those at the state, but we do have a couple things kind of that affect that. Rental licensing and property maintenance. You're familiar with many of those codes. We're going to look at those holistically. Also, our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance will be reviewed comprehensively by the Planning Commission. That has not been done in at least 20 years. I mean, we've got some outdated language here and in other parts of the code, but the biggest impacts, I believe, that we're going to see are going to be in these areas. And then the third priority for community development has to do with service delivery. And we really want to spend some time looking at the services we provide and how we can provide them in the most effective way. Our most active areas are permitting and rental licensing and code enforcement, where we are engaging the public one-on-one. So we're looking at implementing the new community development software. We've talked about that. That could be anywhere from a 6-month to an 18-month process. So that's going to be going on in 2021. We'll also be rolling out a customer survey kind of portal so we can get feedback from those that we're serving. How are we doing? How can we improve our services? So we'll be rolling that out. And then also looking at improving our education, videos, interactions, communication. There's so much technology out there that we've learned over the last 6 months. How can we use that to our advantage to better inform and educate our residents? So those are the three top things we're working on. The Economic Development Strategic Plan, city code updates, and then service delivery, customer service improvements.
Okay, one of the things that you have here, Jenny, is how are you measuring? Can you talk a little bit on how you're measuring your strategic direction, each of your pillars?
Sure. The Economic Development Strategic Plan, our guide plan here, has specific measurables and strategies in it, so we will follow those as we go forward. Some of the measurables that we're putting in our revised annual report have to do with tax base and increases to tax base, stuff we haven't really measured in the past in this format under this directive, so we'll be doing that. The city code measurables, short term, of course, when we're done updating the code, it will be done, but there will be longer term impacts from those changes that are made. So we'll know more about what those are as we get into that work. And then on our customer service improvements, certainly our surveys will tell us.
So just so we all know and meet expectations, and is that on the codes, on the measurable, this is a 1 to 2 year process. And so let's make sure everybody understands this is not something that you're going to be done in 6 months or a year. It could take 2 years for you to go through all of that.
Absolutely, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor. And this initiative is not led by the Community Development Department. It's by all of us in this room. I'm just focusing on the impacts to community development because there's such big sections of the city code and the regulation that we oversee.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, Madam Mayor. It's a 2-year process. Lots of community engagement along with that, lots of input. It will not be done in a vacuum.
Yeah, and I just want to manage everybody's expectations and not all of a sudden you're finding out, where is this?
Right.
Yeah.
And then our measurables for service delivery, our customers' surveys that we look to embed into our new software. We'll look at the number of users and types of users, the efficiency of our process. These software systems that we're looking at have, dashboard is kind of a buzzword, but they have it. And all kinds of people, users, behind the scenes, those that are getting permits can access these different dashboards. So we can see at any given time how long a plan review is taking, how long is it taking someone to schedule an inspection from when they call to when we can be there. So there's all kinds of analytics that are available that we've never had at our disposal before with these new systems. So we'll be able to measure a lot more statistics with that type of system. So
And Jenny, the new software, that's going to take a while to also install, is it?
Absolutely, at least a year, and 18 months to 24 months is.
So the dashboard isn't going to be operational until after that software is built?
Madam Mayor, it depends how we roll it out, if we do kind of one module at a time, or if we do the whole thing at once. We have not picked a vendor yet, so each one's a little bit different, but we are hoping to make a decision here in the next couple of weeks, so we will have more information as we go forward about how implementation looks. But it is, I would say, a 2-year process. I mean, these things don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time, commitment, resources. It's a huge change for what we have now to the upgraded systems that are out there.
Yeah, because I know when on the Governor's Workforce Development Board, when we built the dashboard to measure all of the activities and the different pillars, how to meet all of them, it took 2 years.
Yes,
And there were a lot of bugs.
there will be. We're expecting it.
Yeah. And if is it interactive? Are you going to look at an interactive kind of dashboard?
It absolutely is, and it's they're very customizable these days.
Okay. Good. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and we'll turn it over to Chief Jungman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for your time tonight. Go over a couple of exciting things for the fire department for 2021. You've all been involved and are well aware of the Fire Station 1 replacement. That's definitely taken a team and a community to make happen, and it's really happening. And it's an awesome project, and thanks to everybody's support to make that happen. Really, our goal there is to make sure that we're on time and on budget. Things, knock on wood, have gone well so far, and we don't anticipate that to change. But this facility is really important to the community for many reasons. Obviously, it's an important critical infrastructure to provide emergency services out of, and really want to make sure that we're providing high-quality fire and EMS service not only now, but well into the future. We also want to make sure that we increase the health and safety of our staff. We've talked a little bit about that through this process of what's been built into that station in order to make sure that we provide that. We're increasing the technology and our ability to do training on site there as well. This maintains our efficient and effective operation. Selecting that site was important to the location. I think it's also unique that we've created space for not only the fire department operation, but public use within that fire station. We were very diligent about making sure that that space can be accommodated either way. So we are following the adopted 9 guiding principles, and we will measure the success of that fire station by the efficient and effectiveness of providing services to the community, by the ability to provide training on site without having to take our units out of service or out of position, and as well as the use of that facility by both our staff and by public. Moving into our second topic for 2021 is COVID, and what a year it's been this year. Unfortunately, 2021 is going to see COVID as well. We hope that it doesn't go too far into 2021, but no one has a crystal ball to know when that's going to end. We've learned a lot this year, and we've applied that and continuously learning and improving our service. We're following the best practices around COVID, and those continue to change as we learn more. We're collaborating with local and industry leaders to provide the best service possible to the community. We're taking precautions to keep our staff, our patient, and our community safe. We're providing testing to our public safety staff in certain circumstances to reduce or eliminate the amount of time between testing and results. We've had a response and operational changes to adapt to the situation. As we learn more, we've adapted our response plans and our operations to meet the demands. Really, it's important that we continue to adapt as we go through COVID and maintain the health and safety of our staff and our community. And it's important that we maintain the continuity of our operations so we can fulfill our mission and our guarantee to the community on what we do. And we want to manage the fiscal impacts of the department and the city. What we're measuring there is our ability to maintain our staffing first and foremost so that we can provide that fulfill that mission to the community. We're also measuring sick time use, exposures, and positive cases. And believe it or not, the majority of our staff actually have been exposed to patients that are COVID positive, but because of the protection we are providing them, we've had really limited exposures. So the importance of having that protective equipment and having our staff wear it is of the utmost importance. And our limited exposure to that speaks volumes to being on top of that.
And Chief, because our staff has been properly equipped, and has anyone, because they have been in contact with COVID patients, have they been, and I know they've been exposed, but they haven't tested positive?
We have had some positives in the city.
In the city, yes.
The challenge is it's hard to identify whether it was from contact or not because of the amount of community transmission. You can't always pinpoint exactly where it came from. So
Okay.
it's tough to tell whether it came from an exposure on duty or whether it was an off-duty exposure at this point. So I don't have anybody directly linked to an on-duty exposure at this point,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's really difficult with the amount of COVID out there to say it happened exactly here.
You're transporting them,
Right.
and you're in that small space.
Yep. Yep, and that, and I have Greg, could I have you just advance one slide? I'm gonna go forward and then go backwards. I threw a quick visual in there. This isn't what our firefighter paramedics looked like back in January. This is what they look like showing up now, is the amount of protective equipment that they're wearing, from goggles and face shields to respiratory protection to the blue gowns. And even as much as you can't visually see it here, but they have two sets of boots, one that they wear in the fire station, one that they wear on calls. And so doing everything we can to eliminate that transmission. So this just is a good visual depiction of how we've had to adapt to that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Did you have a question? Vince?
BJ, I haven't, that's the first time I've seen that. How is that impacting response times by including those extra steps? Has that been something that's been an issue?
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Councilmember Workman. I would say it's limited impact to the response time. Really where we're seeing the elongation in time is on the backside of these calls, having to decontaminate and
Yeah,
get
the
set for the
deca.
next call is really where you see it. I think there's seconds or a half minute added probably to the response time. And lots of times that's not included in the response time because we arrive at the doorstep or at the curb and we arrive on scene with dispatch, but then they don like the gown and things like that. So it's not inclusive of that in the drive time or the turnout time. But I would say they've got it down pretty quick now. Things like their respirator and their goggles, they're putting on the way to the call. So realistically, all you're seeing them do is don a blue gown once they get there, which is pretty limited. And, they've figured out how to do that pretty quickly. As you know, we can get in our fire gear pretty quickly, and now we've just learned a new piece of equipment to get into very quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell Maggie she looks good.
They're doing a great job. I'm very proud of the
Yeah.
staff we have, and they've stepped up to the challenge, as is all the city staff. It's an uncertain time, and they've done a great job of adapting and overcoming and make sure that we still provide high-quality service to the community. Our second priority for next year is really improving information transparency. This was something that was kind of born out of an internal survey we did within the department. And really our first step to this is implementing an internal dashboard communication system. And COVID really helped us kind of identify that. And really what we're looking to do is a real-time aggregation of data to do things like road closures, weather, equipment status, and staffing, as well as what hospital is open and closed for patients, and just a number of real-time information sources. Instead of having to go to multiple different sources, staff will have one screen in the station that's dedicated to this kind of dashboarding solution that will provide them real-time intelligence, which has been important previously, but has been really shown in COVID.
Do you have this dashboard solution operating now?
Madam Mayor, we don't currently. We're working on implementing it.
Okay.
We're also looking to visually communicate better to the externally to depict our performance and trying to go to more of visual informatics. We obviously report a lot of information to the council, as well as trying to get information to the public, trying to transition that from a lot of words to really a lot of visual information so people can quickly digest that. And really, we're trying to aggregate that information from many systems and implement the lessons learned from COVID. We really want to improve our internal and external communication, which is important for transparency and accountability. It'll identify opportunities for improvement in our efficient and effective operations, and it'll allow us to make more informed decisions real time. And it'll put those multiple sources in one place. And then lastly, this is kind of ties together with this, is our standards of cover and strategic plan. Some of you may be familiar with what's called a standard of cover. We had one of these back when we were accredited. It's really a best practice, and we haven't had one since the early 2000s. It's something we're currently working on. That standard of cover really takes the community risk from a fire and EMS perspective, as well as the department capabilities, and it identifies gaps and opportunities compared to industry best practices and trends. So we're also going to update our strategic plan to identify priorities in the coming years here and identify the current and future resource needs, as well as find ways to maintain and improve our service level and improve the health and safety of both our staff and the community. It'll allow us to compare and benchmark to the industry best practices, manage our mutual aid use, and evaluate and identify trends. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions? Nope.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you so much. And the placemaking, that's gone very well. Melanie had shared with us the different options that the community had looked at. And so, yeah,
Very much so. Yep.
okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Now we'll throw it over to Greg in Organizational Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I get the opportunity tonight to talk a little bit about what we're doing from a human resource, communications, finance, information technology, and city clerk's office perspective when it comes to supporting the work that we do in the community inside the organization. Three priorities for us this year. The first is our ongoing investment in organizational development and employee engagement. We've been very intentional over the course of the past year and plan to continue to really invest in helping our people, our teams, our organization to be their best. Part of this has been a collaboration and a partnership with the Gallup organization, where we have implemented the Clifton Strengths language to really help our organization kind of figure out what makes us unique and give us a bit of a common language to talk about, and then leverage what makes our employees unique in delivering the best possible service to the public. As we've done that, it's really keyed in nicely and helped us to start a conversation very intentionally that you have been a part of as well around inclusion and belonging. Really, how do we leverage what makes us our unique best, and then ultimately, how do we use those unique talents to best serve the community? So that's been an exciting part of our organizational development initiatives. That's translated into a new employee engagement survey, where we're really focusing on the 12 elements that make an organization function at its best. Again, using the experts and the research from the Gallup organization really to drive how we do public service in the best way possible for our community. All of that work has really helped us to really consider how do we create an environment where inclusion and belonging, really creating an environment where people feel that they can do their best and they can ultimately deliver great service is really kind of at the core of those initiatives. All of this really kind of comes down to your vision about building our reputation as an employer of choice to support being a vibrant city, boldly leading and welcoming to all. That plays nicely into the second area of emphasis for us in this coming year, and that's all about our new experience and engagement function. We just recently completed a communications, and community engagement strategic planning process. In December, you'll actually hear more about that from Carissa Larson, our Director of Communications, Community Engagement. She and Amber Jacobson will be coming in to talk about not only that plan, but our new experience and engagement function, which is really all about centralizing the great work that we've done throughout the community to build relationships, to find connections, and really to create the type of community where belonging is at the center of everything that we do. There's some exciting work happening there, and we'll be back with you to talk more about what that work plan will look like in just several weeks. As we build those relationships, as we build those experiences, really what we're trying to accomplish is creating the types of relationships and leveraging the types of relationships that have been built throughout the community to capitalize on the fantastic diversity that we have, and really make sure that we're meeting the unique needs of everyone who lives, works, and plays in Burnsville, and doing that in a very intentional way, and thinking about how do we create the types of experiences that the community is really looking for when it comes to interactions with city services. The third piece, the third and final piece for us this year is a process improvement effort that we have just started and will continue through 2021. Really our goal here is to make sure that we're being as efficient and as effective as possible in everything we do from an administrative or an organizational services perspective. So our priority through the coming year is going to be to devote resources to not only documenting our business processes, but taking that opportunity really to look at how can we create not only efficiencies, and when I say efficiencies, really it's about providing the type of internal service to my colleagues and their teams so they can provide the best possible public experiences as we deliver city services. So throughout the departments in our division, we'll be looking at not only documenting those processes, but then looking for opportunities for us to improve. How can we provide better experiences? How can we, what should we stop, or continue doing when it comes to really leveraging the resources that we have, continuing to be committed to strong financial stewardship, but perhaps more importantly, using those resources to best address the needs that we have in our community. So with that, I will certainly stand for any questions that you might have.
So a lot of what you're doing is you're building some new strategic direction.
Absolutely.
And so you're using and partnering with the Gallup organization. Are they going to be helping you to also define pillars of success when you're talking about community engagement? What would that look like? What are the pillars that's going to drive you to make that a successful experience?
Yeah, I think there's a unique connection between what we're doing internally from an organizational development perspective and really hearing from our employees. And then as we come back and start talking about what does that mean for community engagement? What does that mean about, to use your phrase, Mayor, the pillars of what success looks like? I think that will absolutely inform the work that then our experience and engagement staff will use to help us all deliver the best possible service and come to you to best understand how those expectations are met and carried out through the community.
My hope is that because we're all looking at having a culture of inclusivity, in that community engagement can help direct us with some of the work that we're doing now, that we're working internally inside the organization with leadership staff, and then the work that's being done now with the mayor and council through the Y.
Absolutely.
But some of those things, I think, can also inform and how we're going to move into with some of the things that you're identifying here, to do the work in the community so that we can achieve that culture within our city that's inclusive and kind.
Absolutely.
And address the whole social injustice.
Well, I think that it provides us an opportunity to take functions and people who might not otherwise interact all the time. I think a good example is after your last inclusion and belonging session as a council, we brought together our communications staff who are focused on our new experience and engagement planning efforts and really getting out and building those relationships, along with our OD staff and our HR staff, some folks from PD and fire, and really started talking about how do we pull together what we're already doing and strategically make a difference at a higher level for the community. So to your point, I think that we'll really be able to emphasize the importance of relationships and our emphasis on belonging as a community.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what you all come up with so that we can all have shared meaning on what that pathway is.
Absolutely.
And then we can monitor the success.
Absolutely. We'll be back in December to continue that conversation.
Okay. Vince?
Yes, I just had a quick follow-up for Greg. So are you implementing the Strengthsfinder?
We have.
Yeah,
You
we
have.
already have.
Yeah, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, Councilmember Workman, every employee has been exposed to it now, and it'll be part of our onboarding initiatives as we go forward.
That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited about it.
Cool, thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you, Greg, and I will pass it over to Garrett with Parks and Recreation and Facilities.
All right, good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. As we look at recreation, parks, and facilities and the work plan for 2021, it's really embedded in our most current facility plan and our Parks and Recreation System plan. Most of the work for our staff will involve continuing to implement portions of that plan that still remain relevant 4 to 7 years later. And then, of course, we're going to be modifying things based on what we've learned and experienced as we continue to live with COVID-19 in the days, weeks, and months to come. As we look at the recreation and facilities portion of it, there's really 3 steps that we'll be focusing on. One is continuing to safely provide what I like to call as close as normal programs as possible, identifying new opportunities that safely engage our community, and then we always are looking for opportunities to partner with the community with the programs and events that we're putting on. So when I speak about as close to normal programs, that's really in reference to events and activities that take place in our parks, at our golf course, our ice center, even in our city buildings where we have public meetings and different events going on in those facilities. As we've learned over the last 8 months, there's just certain types of activities that have better been able to withstand the impact of COVID-19. Examples of that in 2020 where our golf course has experienced record numbers of participants on the course. Our youth and adult athletic programs were able to safely return to play, filling our bat and ball fields and our turf fields throughout the summer and into fall. And our ice center has returned to business as usual, serving our hockey and figure skating residents and local groups in our surrounding communities, as well as hosting different election events here, city meetings, things like that. Of course, none of these plans could have really anticipated the impacts of 2020. So staff have used what we've learned and experienced this year, and we'll be looking to add new programs that are accessible, inclusive, and engage our community safely in COVID times. As we look at 2020, that was things like our drive-in movie or even our Halloween on the Go event that's coming up this Friday. Regardless of our program or facility, we really work across departments, and then we work with our connections to partner with our public and private sector. I think about expanding food truck use at our beach and our golf course and our ice center, working with our public and private groups to either provide new opportunities or to get sponsorships or to add additional content to what we're providing, and even getting volunteers to come and help out at events. As public servants, we just really have that responsibility to ensure that we're adopting these accessible and inclusive practices. And we all know that when we partner with our community, we have an opportunity to enhance the experience that our participants have, and we can do that in a more fiscally responsible way. So jumping to the Parks Master Plan, this is really a 3-step process also. We're going to look to continue to implement our 2013 ADA items that we've identified. We're going to work with our community to further implement our Parks Frameworks Plan that just started last year. And we're going to work with the community to identify potential opportunities to add or expand our popular amenities or to partner with them to enhance our park amenities that we're looking to add. So as we do work in parks, we're always looking at our ADA master plan to figure out how we can incorporate, once we're in a park doing work, the things that are identified in that plan. As I talk about the Parks Frameworks Plan, that's really been a collaborative project across many departments and working with the community to basically remove older, less relevant amenities and look at to replace it with either new, more desirable amenities or turn it into open space or in some cases convert it into natural areas. The purpose of this is really to keep our park system relevant and to make it more sustainable both from a fiscal standpoint and from a natural sustainable standpoint. And then finally, we've got a number of popular activities, whether it's fishing, tennis, pickleball. These are things that we're looking to implement and improve upon. They tend to span across multiple generations and multiple cultures, and there's opportunities to improve certain situations there. And then, again, as always, we look to do this type of work as often as possible, staying in contact with our local service groups. We have a great history with our Rotary and our Lions Club of finding ways to partner and either support a new project that maybe we couldn't have done at all, or to make a great project even better through those partnerships. And then the third and final area of focus is going to be to further define and update our facilities and our parks plan. Many of you know that we've been partnering with the county on the Lake Marion Greenway Trail, which is going to make Kelleher Park a trailhead. And that park has some great opportunities to really be a more inclusive location that emphasizes that trailhead and possibly creates multiple uses there, either as gathering spaces for events or family gatherings. The boardwalk will be going out into the wetland area, so there's opportunities for nature programs and things like that in that area that hopefully will come out of this master plan. We'll be looking to identify opportunities to improve our signage and our wayfinding to make our parks more inclusive and equitable. There's things about signage that make people feel welcome. When we're using distance markers and things like that on trails, that creates opportunities to increase physical fitness and things like that. So trying to identify where we can best add those to the park system as well. Third, we have the opportunity to look at what are some of the amenities that meet the cultural needs of our entire community. Burnsville's changed since the park system, the bulk of the park system was put in the 80s. And the way people at different cultures use our facilities has changed as well. And so we want to look at those, are there things out there that are going on in the community that we currently aren't meeting the needs of? And by doing these types of analysis, it's going to help us to continue to keep our park system relevant and meet the needs of our diverse community. And then the last thing that's under this is really to update our 2015 facility space needs study. Again, as you know, we've completed 2 portions of what was identified as a 3-phase process. We learned in phase 2 that it only takes a year or 2 for a study to get out of date. And then we also know that during COVID-19, space needs and things like that may be changing the way we do business dramatically. So that is all part of where we're looking to spend our time in 2021.
Okay. Any questions for Garrett? Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We heard the golf course survived COVID with some pretty good success. Can you tell us how the Ice Center did throughout COVID and what that particular financial result was?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Keeley. Yeah, so the Ice Center was closed through June 30th of 2020. It took a little while. A lot of our staff had been redirected to other departments, and so it was a slow transition back of staff with our customers returning somewhat slowly, just once they knew that we were open, with the associations trying to figure out how they were going to get up and running and whatnot. Currently, our ice rentals are pretty much exactly on par as what we would have expected prior to a COVID-19 situation. Burnsville is positioned geographically well, that we have communities around us that are hungry for ice time, in addition to our local associations and our legacy groups that have their needs as well. So geographically, we're located well. It's allowed us to maintain our ice sales at a similar level to the past. Obviously, we're dealing with gaps in the time that we were closed down, and we have not reopened our concession stand. There'll be some other, a variety of little things here and there that will impact the bottom line. I can't tell you at this time what the true final impact is. I just know that at this point, ice sales are back to normal and are strong and are looking good moving forward as long as this condition is maintained, so.
Good, thank you. Maybe City Manager Lee could give us just a number of where we forecasted it for 2020.
I'd have to look to our Finance Director Rhodey on the exact number. I mean, it's been a changing number, Madam Mayor and Council, so I think we had projected a loss earlier when we presented in June. I don't have those exact numbers, but allow us to look them up, and before we leave tonight, we'll get you something.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then also, what kind of plans, then I'm just following up with Councilmember Keeley. So when things change, because we're seeing a surge, so what happens? You know, do we have to shut down?
Madam Mayor, council members, I don't think I can provide a solid answer to that, other than it would really all depend on what the requirements are of the governor. It would also be independent of a specific user group if they had a certain situation where they had to pull back for some reason, and we will work with all those user groups on a one-on-one basis. But, you know, if the ice center, if ice centers were closed down in the state of Minnesota for 2 weeks, that would be one thing. If we went back to a complete shutdown like we did early on, that would be a different scenario, right? So it would really depend on what the scenario was and how we would need to respond, which would always be in line with what the state is requiring.
Okay. So again, we also have some unknowns, but we also need to make sure that we have, you know, what kind of plans do we have in place? Because this morning, we had a conversation with the superintendent of school from 196 and talked about the athletes who are back playing, and that's a concern to some of the principals. And so, especially when there's a surge. So I think those are some of the things that those are the unknowns.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and
Yeah.
Council, absolutely. We monitor these items closely. Garrett and his team do an excellent job working with our user groups. If we need to make adjustments, we are prepared to do that. And we would be reporting back to the council accordingly, so you are aware of the decisions that are being made or where we think we should be going.
So Garrett, my question has to do with the Parks Master Plan. And I've been out to the tennis courts because, you know, I've gotten a lot of, and I have another letter that I'm going to give to Melanie and you with some pictures. And this is, have to do, I think it's Terrace Oaks Park, the tennis courts over there. And so I know that you have some of it on the Parks Master Plan, and is that coming up in 2022? Neil and Terrace Oaks?
Yes, Madam Mayor, council members, there is tennis courts have a life cycle of, they are installed fresh, and then about halfway through their life cycle at about 10 years, you come through and you kind of resurface those courts. And so both Neil and Terrace Oaks East are scheduled to receive that treatment in 2021, which will restore them to as close to new as possible and hopefully extend their life for another 10 years, at which time they would repeat the life cycle at that point.
Yeah, because the leagues that play out there asked me to come out and take a look at both Neil and Terrace Oaks, and then they sent me pictures, and I'll share those pictures that they sent. But they do look very bad.
Madam Mayor, council members, I would agree 100%. They are very much reflective of 10 years old and are desperately in need of the work that they'll have in 2021.
Okay. Because I look at your plan here, and so I think, again, managing expectations and what's going to happen on that Parks Master Plan. What's on the books to be done, and I've gone through the capital improvement plan to see what's on the docket for 21. So, and it's for sure those two parks and those tennis courts are going to be. Okay.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will turn it over to Chief Schwartz. Thanks.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I'm very excited to share some of the initiatives that we're working on, some challenges that we're moving forward here in 2021. Our community engagement and mental health unit. Currently, you might know, we have a community resource unit, and they handle all things community engagement. They work with our apartment managers. They do a number of things with licensing, code enforcement, and so they're going to continue with that community engagement piece, but we're also going to be reassigning some of their duties so we can pull in this mental health response. We really want to focus on that. I'll be talking with you a little bit more later tonight, more specifically on that, but our mental health calls for service have continued to increase over the years, and so there's a need for a new approach. Law enforcement is still receiving the majority of these calls, and so there is no mechanism in place for us not to respond, and we want to do a good job in responding to our community. So we're going to continue to focus on those community relationship building pieces and the community engagement, but we're going to add that proactive response to mental health services. So the bottom line here is we're going to continue to partner with Dakota County Crisis. We're going to look to partner with more mental health professionals and within the industry, and then to really provide the best possible service we can to individuals that are suffering from mental illness and mental health crisis in our community. And that kickoff for that, we've already been doing some work around that. Again, I'll be talking with you about that, but the kickoff for that officially change is going to be January of 2021. So we're looking forward to that, to see what develops there. In regards to trauma treatment and officer wellness, this is critical for our first responders. I can't say it enough. So we are working towards extending our contract for psychological services with Marie Ridgway and Associates. Marie and her team work specifically with providing specialized care for public safety responders. So there's that trust there that they're going to talk to someone that understands what they're going through. This is really important. I want this to be just not an initiative, that this is just the culture of who we are in our organization, and that's okay for officers to go in and ask for help, and that we can help each other and talk about it. We have to remove that stigma. So this is some steps we've been taking last year. We're going to continue to do that as we move forward. And then we want to continue to invest in our peer support team. That's another mechanism that we have in place for officers to just have that conversation with the folks that they work with every day. And then we really want to expand our services. We look at mental health and wellness and physical wellness and spiritual wellness, but really look at mindfulness and sleep and nutrition and family wellness, because all of these things just really impact public safety each day that they come in. And we want our officers to really survive these stress injuries, so they can stay in the profession and provide that service. But not just survive, but thrive. So that's the goal behind a lot of this. And then, again, at the end of the day, if we're healthy, if our officers are healthy, we have healthy teams out in the community, they're going to be able to provide that best possible service that they can in any situation that they're encountering. So that is the goal with that. Our strategic plan, we were really excited. We are still really excited about doing this in 2021, but much like everything else, we started this really in 2019. We started going pretty hard on this in 2020, and then COVID hit. Yeah. So we were set to come together. I feel like that kind of is the saying for everything. Then COVID hit, and we had to put a pause on everything, right? Yeah. So we put a pause on it. It's been a long pause. We were hoping, let's see if we can bring our teams back together, because we had done a majority of gathering a lot of information from our teams. Where do we want to go in the future as the new chief, as a department? Where are we going? We haven't had a guide plan renewed since 2012, so this was pretty exciting for us. And so we just have decided there is no way for us to meet in a large group with our public safety safely. And so we're going to take that to a virtual platform so we can continue our work there and then hopefully have a good product in 2021 that we can then integrate into our culture. Really working with organizational services to make sure we're aligning with all of the city's organizational values and that we're working in alignment with that to get our strategic plan set. So we're excited for that. And then lastly here, Police Accountability Act and compliance. I'll be talking with you a little bit more about that as well tonight. But as you know, after the death of George Floyd, there was a number of police reforms that moved forward. There was adopted legislation. And so we've been looking at that adopted legislation. We've been comparing that to what we currently do. We've been looking at our policies. We've been looking at all of our procedures. And then comparing that to determine, where do we have to make adjustments? Where are we in compliance? What dates do these things have to happen so that we make sure that we're complying with what we need to do for post-licensing and the state mandates. So, and additionally, there'll be training that will have to be provided. So we're working through all of that. And at the end of the day with this, it's really, we want to be transparent about what we're doing. We want the community to know where we sit, where we land with our policies, and how we're going to make whatever adjustments or improvements we need to meet those needs in the community. So this will be ongoing. I would expect there's probably going to be more discussion about other police reform legislation next year. And so we'll continue to monitor that, work with the community, and I'll continue to be in contact with all of you as those things happen. So, and with that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
Yep.
Thanks, Chief. And last but certainly not least, Ryan Peterson, our Public Works Director.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks, Melanie.
Good evening.
What we're going to be talking about, you see 4 items there, but what really my focus is on getting our sustainability plan up and running for 2020. That's, we're planning on bringing that to you, or 2021. We're planning on bringing that final plan approval to you at the next meeting of the regular city council, and we're going to get some of those things kicked off. One of the first things we're going to work on is our multimodal and complete streets policies. So this is relates to sustainability because we need basically anyone who wants to get around Burnsville have a way they can do it, whether they own a car or not. We want to make sure the transit system works. If you want to walk or bike, we want to know that you can have good routes to get there. And we just, how that relates to sustainability is it gets you outside, and basically people of all different cultures, economic classes, and abilities are able to get throughout the city. One thing we don't want to do is have a situation where you're surprised by what we're doing. We want it to be well thought out when we bring to you these on-street bike lanes, so that it's, here's our plan, here's what we agree that we're planning to do, and maybe this is an area where it's on-street bike lanes, maybe this is an area where it's off-street on a trail. So that's what we want to have as a adopted plan, and that this would be your expectations when we come up with a project. This is the reason why we're putting this in when. Also, complete streets is a little different than that. That's basically, let's use the entire right-of-way to the fullest potential that we can. So if we're doing a reconstruction project, do we want some stormwater management in there? Do we want some trees? Think of the Burnsville Center Village redevelopment. That we hope to put some complete streets type of theories into there, so that we're using our space and our assets to the greatest extent possible. And once again, that it wouldn't be a surprise when we're proposing different things like that. So that's the first one, is the complete streets and multimodal policy. The fleet study is our second one. We've been talking about this.
Before you go on with the complete streets, we had a very good project that we did this year on Travelers Trail.
Yeah. Yep.
And the feedback I received was very positive, except for 2.
Okay.
Right? I think I sent that along too.
Yes, bicycling can be surprisingly polarizing, but there is a lot of there's a lot of emotion around it. But I would say we definitely receive more positive comments on bike lanes than we have who are not quite as excited about them. But yeah, so we are very excited to get that in, and we obviously had a project going, and it was the best time to do it, so.
The street looks good.
Yes.
I believe we're still working on the contractor with the boulevard grass and all of that.
Yeah, that's correct. They're a lot better shape than they were
Yeah.
July, August.
Yeah.
Dramatically better.
Yeah.
But they'll still be coming back in March, April timeframe to see how things have come in, and if there still needs more work, they would come back.
That's the first time we used that contractor. Am I correct?
That was the first time that they were a general contractor in town, correct?
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad. They were a really good paving contractor.
Yeah.
But some of their good results got
Not so
lost.
good on the details with the lands, replacing the sod.
Right, and to their detriment, the good work they did can get overshadowed by something that's relatively simple to take care of. I mean, it's
Agreed.
never simple to grow grass
Agreed.
Yeah.
in July, but nonetheless, it is kind of too bad from that perspective, and we certainly let them know our opinions and had to do some threatening to make sure they did get out there this fall and did make at least improvements, if not fully satisfy their contractual requirements.
Yeah. Councilmember Keely.
The other benefit that I noticed living on that road was slowing some traffic down by narrowing the lane to a single,
That
with
was-
the utility turn lanes instead of two.
Yeah. It's traffic calming.
Yes, it's quieter because there's new surface, but it's also quieter because we can tell when we have our windows open, the speed of the cars that are flying westbound and then having to come to an abrupt stop. It seems with the two lanes on each side, I don't know why people thought that was a 50-mile-per-hour zone or something, but that has definitely had an improvement on the speed of traffic.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell by the sound of their, in some cases, mufflers, right? And/or the tires, if they're, bigger tires. But overall, the surface is great. I like the bike trail, certainly like the slower traffic. And I agree 100%. You made a spot-on statement where some really good work can be overshadowed by the simplest, landscaping type of work that shouldn't have been a big deal, ended up just becoming a pain and a frustration for a long time.
Yes.
You've heard a lot from Stratford, I'm sure.
Comments were justified, I think they were, so. But what we talked about there, road diet, basically reducing the amount of lanes is something that would be part of this and would be described when we come upon these situations in other areas where, why do we need 4 lanes that have, on a road that has 4,000 cars a day? It doesn't add up, so
Right.
let's make full use of that pavement in other ways.
Madam Mayor, can
Yeah.
I add one other thing?
Yeah.
I forgot. My wife walks our dog westbound and crosses the intersection, the entrance into Cub Foods. There it's appearing to be either she's invisible or a lot of cars come out of Cub Food and they blow through that stop sign, almost as if they don't even know it's there. And she's been nearly clipped a couple of times. And, she's a safety hawk. She has flashing red lights on the dog and on her strap, dog walking strap. And so it's impossible that she's not seen. And I think cars are just blowing through there because they don't even see the stop sign. And so I had mentioned that, sometimes putting in those flashing
Like we have on the
lights
Parkway
around, at the Parkway where the.
and Eagle Ridge.
The trim of the stop sign will
Yeah.
flash.
Yeah.
So people actually see it. I don't know how else, but and so I walk the dog that way too, and I haven't been nearly hit, but I've witnessed, fortunately I wasn't in the intersection at the time, I've witnessed countless cars just come zooming out of there and with complete oblivion that there's a stop sign to enter that intersection coming out of that parking lot. I don't know why it's so invisible or difficult to see or what, but I've witnessed it a lot. Fortunately, I haven't been like Carrie and and been nearly hit a couple times.
Okay.
Don't you worry about those flashing lights flashing in the windows of those townhomes?
It would be facing, the lights would be facing the strip center,
Okay.
so it wouldn't actually
Oh,
be.
so you're talking about flashing lights back, coming out of the strip center?
Well, it'd be the stop sign itself, where we have them around the edge of the stop sign, where the stop sign itself is flashing, and I suppose it has a sensor to start doing that when cars are approaching. Something, I don't know what to do, but it's one of those spots where it's a bit scary. You really have to watch, and then just, if cars are coming, you have to wait until you see that they're actually slowing down to make sure that they are gonna slow down and stop.
Okay.
Good
Kara?
idea anyways.
Councilmember Keeley, I think for council and also for Ryan to be able to properly evaluate this, we would need a photo or perhaps some video of the dog being walked with the flashing lights and the flashing leash.
If she's at home watching
Okay.
right now, she'll she'll do that.
I'm
Be
going
happy
to
to
pull
do
our
that.
meeting back, and so Ryan can finish his story on Public Works. I just wanted to say that because you're looking at streets and you're doing complete streets, and you're telling us about how you're evaluating all of that, and when you put them in, when you do reconstruction, so.
All correct. The police and the engineering department lead the traffic committee, and we're both heard it tonight. We will have that as an item of discussion. There could be that particular site, it could be others as well, where we have a situation. The challenge with putting in a flashing stop sign in one location, it can be then, is we need them everywhere. So we do have to have the right criteria, but I'm digressing back. So we'll put it on the committee to talk about.
And the other thing is that I don't know if we can get another ARP grant, because we did that and we put it out in, I think it was over on Girard and the Parkway, right?
That was for a rapid rectangular
Yeah.
flashing beacon crossing, yes. So that's a little different story, but nonetheless, it's possible.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
we'll keep moving on.
Yeah.
Our fleet system analysis and optimization study. Each year we go into budget and we have to reevaluate what it is we're doing in our fleet replacement plan. It's vehicles continue to go up and up and up in cost, and we don't find ways to retire them very easily or not replace them. I think we have over 600 pieces of vehicles and equipment in our inventory list to keep track of, and we have maintained an excellent fleet through the years. It's just getting more challenging each year to keep that up and running. And so what this is about is determining how our fleet is compared against comparable cities' types of fleets for the amount of vehicles in it, to make sure we're right-sized. We want to make sure that we're competitive in that respect, so that we're not having more vehicles than we need. Also, we're trying to learn about different ways of procuring. Maybe we can lease vehicles for 6 months a year instead of owning them. There's whole agencies out there, companies that do fleet in a different way. So we just don't have that type of expertise in-house to understand that. So what we want to do is learn from people who this is what their job is and can provide us some guidance. Also, perhaps there's different ways of evaluating how long a vehicle should be kept. We certainly are doing our best right now, but certain vehicles, after 12 years, they've met their useful life and we need to replace them. Maybe those vehicles can make it 15 years. There's all this different type of things that we can do to make sure that we're having the lowest life cycle cost per vehicle possible. That's our goal out of this, quite honestly. Another thing regarding sustainability will be to get an electrification goal for our fleet. Should we have, it may not be by the number of electrical vehicles, but it could be hybrids. In other words, you're improving your fuel efficiency, so we take credit for that. So this is a multi-pronged study, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see where we are and where we're going, and different ways that others are managing their fleet, because we want to be as efficient as we can, both from replacement and then fuel consumption and greenhouse gas type of perspectives. Obviously, a big sustainability aspect to this.
so Ryan, when you get to finishing that plan, we'll know how the progression would be in terms of how you're benchmarking the fleet size
Oh, most definitely. The
And
goal
then
here
we'll know
will be
about that
is,
and the method.
the goal here will be, this isn't gonna be a 1 year, fixed it, or I'm not saying it's broke, but you didn't make all your modifications in 1 year. This will be over a period of years where we could either, like I said, procure vehicles in a different manner, or maybe there will be opportunities to retire them if, when their useful life is done, as opposed to replacement. That's what our goal. There's company or cities that may have systems where you sign out vehicles as opposed to just assigning them. So we do some of that currently, but there may be ways to do that in a more efficient manner. So we'll be looking at all these different ways that others have come up to manage this. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it'll be good for us to know so that in monitoring progress.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay, wait, Vince has a question.
Thank you. And right now, this is probably going to sound like a joke, but I'm kind of serious. If there, and it's a small sample size, but I'd be curious to see if not hiring seasonals has any impact on the fleet and maintenance and quality of how well they're taken care of.
I think what you would see is the need, we could
seen
retire
things.
some more of those old squad cars. So we do take and keep some of the squad cars that we keep, other ones that are worth more than we typically trade those off. But typically what we use for many of our seasonals, if they're not in a regular full-size piece of equipment, would be an old police cruiser that they would go around in. So in this year's budget, the seasonals are back. So we plan on utilizing them again in 2021. But it'll be an interesting thing to quantify.
Like I said, I don't know if you could
So
quantify
are
it
you
after one
remembering,
season.
you
That's
have
what I
some
was like,
memories
some
of
flashbacks.
when you were a seasonal?
I didn't do it.
The best of the best.
Probably like a
I was
Caddyshack
just
themed movie
wondering
that
if
could
you're
be made
just
about
telling
seasonal
stories
municipal
that
workers.
you don't want people to know about.
I always got like the 1972 Chevy. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the feedback. I was, if you get high school kids or post-high school kids driving around those cars, I mean, they're beating them up maybe a little bit more than our staff. But again, I don't know how you would quantify that or even look into something like that. It was just something that I popped up, given our circumstances
I
this
think
summer.
Ryan's pretty good with the people that works for him to identify.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus by saying that either, so.
We haven't run into too many challenges with them driving too poorly, but we will certainly find ways to keep an eye on that.
I don't need a follow-up. I just thought I'd throw that out.
All right. Finally, our third natural resource management plan. This is more like the flora and fauna type of thing that we do in natural resources, so it's closely related to the water resource management plan, but this would be upland, or how we're keeping invasive species like buckthorn out, our oak or prairie savanna thing that we've done out on Terrace Oaks Park. And basically, this is going to be, the last plan was 2007, so we want to make sure that we are current and that folks who are interested in this thing in the city are getting what they want out of what we're doing, how we're spending our resources, and making sure that this is what the community wants when it comes to natural resources, upland management. And this will be driving what we do in this area for future years. So this has an obvious, very close link right to sustainability and how our forests are, how we're doing our wildlife management and all those kinds of things, and what we should continue to do there. So this will be an update of a current plan that's 12 years old. And finally, this would be some more individual things related to sustainability, but we'll be completing the Twin Lakes and Crystal Lake project. When the water levels stay up so high, they are hard on the shoreland there, and the shores can do more eroding than we would like them to do. Also, it kills the vegetation around the ponds and the lakes. Also, like this year on July 4th, we had to have the no wake on. So that's really kind of a bummer when you can't take your speedboat out on July 4th, the busiest boating day of the year. So this will hopefully reduce the risk of that occurring into the future. We're completing upgrades at the water treatment plant, which will be the Those are original to the or the groundwater plant in the 70s, so we should become more efficient and more reliable there. Nicollet Commons Water Park feature is already approved. We got the third of 3 bid packages for next council meeting. And obviously, I'm not losing our 4 million gallons of water a day, or 4 million gallons of water a year that we've been doing currently will be a very sustainable approach, along with getting more people outside enjoying the outdoors. Completing the Lake Marion Regional Trail, Garrett talked about that earlier. That's going to provide ways for transportation and recreational opportunities. And then I'm happy to report our salt budget for the first year and for the first time in 3 years will not have a sizable increase. We had a really large increase last year, and the year before it snowed so much, so we're hoping we don't get a lot of snow, but the chemical stayed relatively close, so this is more of a financial sustainability, but we also work to improve our reductions in salt use as well. So that's my report. It's based upon trying to get our sustainability kicked off the ground, and I'm standing for any questions.
You know, is salt still the most sustainable and environmentally friendly product?
It's the most effective way of providing transportation, safe transportation, and not having a huge cleanup each year. So you can go either way between sand and salt. Sand carries with it phosphorus and different things into our ponds that we have to clean out.
Yeah.
Salt is, there's no way to sugarcoat what either one does. They're both harmful to the environment.
They
I can't
both
sit
have
here
their
and say it
benefits and
isn't.
disadvantages.
And they both have advantages and disadvantages, correct.
Yeah.
Obviously, the customer demand at this point is, we
And
can't be
I've
late
seen
for our baseball, basketball practice. There just is no, we're gonna wait 3 days for it to melt on its own or something like that. So we're trying to meet the demand and being as judicious as we can and keeping everyone as safe as we can while mitigating the environmental impacts that go with it.
You know, one of the things that I liked when you all did your presentations and all of that is you told us how many employees you had, and you, Ryan, would tell us how many miles that you had to take care of roads. So how many miles above the ground and how many miles under the ground? Because you have all of the, not only the water distribution system, the sanitary distribution, and all of that. Because people don't realize that there's a lot of miles under the ground that you take care of.
Yeah, we have 225 miles of road that we own. There's 275 in the whole community, but you start adding county and the DOT. Most of those miles have many different pipes underneath them, so you can do the math pretty quick. Our whole infrastructure valuation, I'm looking at Jenny, but it's in the $500 million range of what the city's worth.
Yeah.
Not for facilities, basically pavements and roads and utilities and pipes and that kind of thing. So it's a big enterprise, that's for sure.
Because when I look at the complement of our human resource, 62,000 people, 27 square miles, and what you all do, every one of you. You know, it's amazing, and I thank you all for the work that you all do, because, you know, Jenny, I look at you and your department, and you have planning, but you also have inspections, you know, and then you have 26,000 units of housing, and then you have 2,500 in businesses and all of that, and you do that work. And this is what I don't think a lot of folks know, but when we tell them, and I know that sometimes in our monitoring reports we get some of that information, but people don't hear about it, but we need to let them know, because what are they paying for? You know, so I look at police and fire, and you're doing the same thing in a city that's built out already, 27 square miles, and, you know, you're going from point to point. And the other thing is that we've got more and more senior housing units in our city in the last 10 years. I don't, and that puts pressure on fire for all of the medical calls, as well as police. So, I mean, everything, every decision we make has an impact on service delivery and a cost. So I think somehow when we're looking at all of this stuff and how we're budgeting for things, it's all of that. And then we need to understand, you know, you grow the tax base, but at the same time, the cost of the growth of that tax base, depending on the product. Okay. But thank you all very much, Melanie and staff, for the report. Any comments, thoughts? Okay.
Madam Mayor and Council, I want to respond back to Councilmember Keeley's question. We anticipate, for today, a net difference of $177,000 for the ice arena for 2020.
For 2020.
Yeah, you got it. And Madam Mayor and Council, I hope, thank you to the team and their staff for helping not only prepare the budget, but prepare tonight. I hope you heard your vision in what our team reported. I hope you heard your values in what our team reported, because that's really what we're laser focused on. Is we have 225 miles of streets, but there's a lot to that to make it a livable community.
Yep.
And so I want to thank the team for putting it together, and I want to thank you for your questions, and be happy to stand for any questions you may have.
Well done, thank you. Okay, the next, and this is the Ames Center budget, and the Ames Center is part of our organization. We just outsource that particular function to an outside partner. And so we appreciate, because now it's the Ames Center giving us their report. And so welcome, Brian and Steve.
And Madam Mayor and Council, we will also have our Finance Director, Jenny Rhodey, available as well.
Yeah,
And Alyssa to answer any questions as well.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, City Council and City staff for having us here tonight. Appreciate the opportunity to present our budget and kind of give an overview of where we are currently with Ames Center and operations and financials. I want to take an opportunity to introduce Steve Peters. He is our VenueWorks founder and president, and he's in town today. Our corporate offices are based in Ames, Iowa, so he is here today just to catch up and to be here to give perspective or any questions you may have related to our presentation and what's taken place in the industry. I will go ahead and jump into the presentation. I'm looking for the slides.
So while we're waiting for that, I have a question for you, Brian.
Yes.
Because most of the time when you come before us and give your presentation, and even before that, when we had the Ames Center Commission, it was always the chair and you doing that. And you always prepared the background material along with staff.
Correct. Yes.
Did you have any input into the preparation of this background?
You know, I did not get a chance to participate in that preparation of the background for this particular presentation, no.
Okay.
Madam Mayor and Council, I asked our staff to prepare the background and asked Brian to prepare the presentation. It was a symbiotic discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah. Dan?
City Manager Lee,
Yes.
why was the process changed this year?
You know what, Councilmember, I don't know if I've got a history of the process. So as we came into this year's budget, I don't know that I had that same history. Our finance director, who had previously worked very closely on this, was no longer here. And so Jenny and I worked together with Brian to help evolve. So I can't speak to how it was done in the past. I just know, how we're looking forward.
Okay,
Okay, yeah,
okay.
well, I think it's worth stating, I guess I'm going to restate, I apologize, Madam Mayor. The Ames Center is a $20 million community asset that we own and that we outsource the management of to the experts in the industry. But we own a $20 million asset, and so the partnership between VenueWorks and clearly Brian as the person there every day doing the work, and the city is critical to the success of the Ames Center. From my perspective, and I would think that's the way it's been for the 14 years that I've been on here. And I'm the guy who fought against it getting built as a public funding.
But now embrace it. It's a great asset.
Once that decision was made, I wanted it to make money as quickly as possible to lower the debt burden, or the financial burden on the community, and you delivered on that. And so that sort of partnership is how successful things happen. And so I think going forward, we have to make sure that we have that sort of partnership when it comes to when you come in before us to do a presentation. It needs to be a collaborative between staff and you, not a staff one thing and you doing another.
Yeah.
And Madam Mayor and Council, my apologies if you're left with the impression that we didn't work together. That I can assure you that wasn't the case. But I'm certainly looking forward to Brian's presentation today and answering any questions you might have.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember
All right,
Keeley,
Brian.
Madam Mayor.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. The last time I was here to present was back on June 9th, and we had at that point just received word from the state of Minnesota that we were going to be able to open up under limited capacity. It was a very exciting time. We were working hard to get our clients and our facility users lined up to go ahead and to continue to use the facility and determine who could still work in that limited capacity. And I had prepared some financials based on, or related to 2019 to kind of run through the past year performance, which we know was a very strong year for us, and to give some financial projections under a couple different scenarios of reopening, whether that would have been in July or January. So I wanted to kind of take a similar format as I present tonight and just kind of give you an update of where we are since that meeting, to give you some updates, and then I'll run through some financial projections for this fiscal year we're currently in that ends in December, and our fiscal year 21 proposed budget numbers. So to start with, just to recap, VenueWorks was able to capitalize on the PPP funding. We're able to deliver $217,000 to, hold on.
We see it on our monitors.
There we go. There's the slide. Sorry about that to our viewing audience. We were able to deliver that, and that was able to keep a lot of our staff employed during the time when we were closed. And that was, as a reminder, was not a cost to the city, so that covered a lot of our staff, or covered our staffing and our utility expenses done through VenueWorks, and that will be our company that will be working on the loan forgiveness portion of that too, at no risk to the citizens of Burnsville. During that time, we were also able as a company to be able to get a volume purchase of Victory electrostatic sprayers. This was in the midst of a national shortage. This equipment obviously became very valuable as COVID started to grow in March and April. The technology is very efficient for us to be able to clean and sanitize the facility in a very fast manner. And so we're able to get a handheld and a backpack sprayer, and we've been using those for all of our events, and we're able to use it during real time, not just for pre-event to sanitize, but during events we go through, sanitize high touch points of handrails and other areas, and then we use it for our cleanup and incorporate it with our standard processes. So very valuable. We're able to get that in the chemical to be ready for that reopening. We did a survey on a corporate level to all of our markets. Ours was completed in the beginning of July, just really to reach out to our facility patrons, gauge the comfort of their attending events, to know Would they be willing to come back, understanding what our processes are for cleaning, sanitation, safety, and to gauge that. And overall had a positive response from our patrons that they'd be really ready to return back and they'd be comfortable too if we took the precautions we did. And so that helped us get some comfort level that we were going to be able to be successful when we did reopen even at 25% capacity. One of the other things, we had to make some tough decisions, and I think last time I presented, we had moved forward with some furloughs with 5 of our 8 full-time staff members. We realized we were not going to be getting the business back to a level that it was pre-COVID. Had to make the difficult decision to move forward with formal layoffs in August, and so we are currently down to 3 full-time staff members, and that had unfortunately had to take place after PPP funds ran out, and we were able to give notice to those staff. Reopening update, we did implement our COVID-19 preparedness plan for the Ames Center, and that is a plan that's posted on our website. We worked with the templates and the infrastructure that the state of Minnesota, Stay Safe, has provided. It was a very useful tool. It made our job very easy to incorporate guidelines based off of our facility, and so we have that posted, and we've been working with our staff on a training related. The other area we did is we worked with Ticketmaster and created pod seating, and we are able to sell pods of tickets up to 6. So we created pods within our seating manifest that are pods of 2, 4, and 6 areas of seats that are sold to people of the same household. And so from there, we social distance those pods, and that gets our capacity. Currently, our maximum capacity is 250, so we have that set up in a manner to get close to our capacity for our seating. And so that was a big undertaking in partnership with Ticketmaster. I've also been working on multiple versions of the 2021 budget and multiple forecast scenarios for year end, and I'll share some of those results with you here in just a minute. We are continuously working with the Ames Center facility users to identify programming that can function under current guidelines. What we realized is that dance competitions can still operate, as well as in October, we had a fitness competition, a bodybuilder contest for 2 days, and we found that those, they do work. We're not bringing in the number of people. We're not providing, Madam Mayor, you have a question?
No, I'm just waving at VJ's children.
Oh, okay. So we found dance competitions and business meetings, and right now we're seeing a real strong interest. I think this is really weather related. Now that we're seeing musical artists typically performing in outdoor environments, such as they did for the drive-up concerts that took place here in Burnsville very successfully. We're seeing some more interest from artists to move into the 25% capacity, and so we're working with them and getting creative on how we can make it a successful environment for them to perform in, as well as us. During this time frame, with all the processes we have, we're gaining a real strong knowledge base of event operations and how we can work under these new parameters. We also recognize that we're going to continue to implement a lot of these procedures post-COVID. I mean, things are going to obviously get better with COVID at some point, but we feel it's going to be important to continue up the sanitation efforts, the health and safety efforts that we've been putting forth under the new operating guidelines, and that'll be a lot of what will continue. And with this too, is we're building confidence within the patrons who utilize our facility that we truly are looking at health and safety as our #1 concern. Since we reopened, just covering again on our 3 full-time staff, we're covering all areas of programming, event management, ticketing, marketing and promotion, food and beverage, financial reporting, HR, and facility maintenance and responsibilities. So a lot to keep us busy right now, and continuing to program as aggressively as we can.
Madam Mayor
Yeah.
and Brian, is that list of operational activities pretty much the same list as if you were, booked in a normal situation? I mean, what actually did you stop really having to do to run the center?
you know, we still have to operate in the same manner, whether we have one event or 100 events. We still need the same attention to our clients for marketing and promotion of events. And the work and the administrative work, which, you know, many people just don't realize takes place before and during and after. It's not as much during the event. We have a lot of event staff that are covered as show expenses that do take care of a lot of the duties and responsibilities that we need, but there's a tremendous amount of administrative and work that does take place around every event. And so, yes, we have not dropped any level of service to our clients or to what we provide.
And just while we're on the subject, could you give us an idea of how much time you're interacting with industry agents, the industry as a whole, to stay in tune with what's going on, right? I mean, how things are going, monitoring the COVID and monitoring as things open up a little bit, certain states dial up like ours is, et cetera. Just how much time are you spending on, you know, monitoring the industry activity during COVID?
It's a daily task, and it's also the amount of outreach to the agents and to the artists and the people we do business with, our clients, takes place regularly. I talked to three business partners today that were agents, just to find out what was going on and to see what what artists they are still representing and what they're seeing in the industry, and to essentially keep our fingers on the pulse, which is essential right now. And especially with everything that's going on, we have to be in a strong position for us to take advantage of any opportunities that do come up, not just under our current capacity, but when the dials do change and go up, we want to make sure we're there and ready. And I feel confident we are with the team we have in place now, but also with the relationships. And we're seeing it in our markets, and I guess I'll defer to Steve if you want to maybe just provide a quick update of what we're seeing for business within the other markets that we serve. The business is alive right now, very much is. It's not at the level we're maybe used to, and we don't drive by our facility and see the crowds of people like we do all the time, but we still do have events, and we're still working very hard on that. And we've had success in other markets that we serve too.
But to the point that you asked about in terms of keeping up with the day-to-day in the industry has had the same kind of staffing contraction you've had here that we've had at all of our buildings. So the agent you might have talked to about a particular show may be laid off. There may be somebody, it may have gone through 2 or 3 people in the last 7 months as you try to keep up with the show that you had booked for this fall that moved to next spring, that's now moving to next fall. And each time you're talking to somebody else differently. So, I mean, that is an oddly, unusually hard process that takes all of us to try to follow that through. As far as what's going on around the country, everything. I mean, we've got a murder trial going on in Racine in a building there. We've got traffic court being held in the atrium of a historic theater in an Illinois building. But we had 3 huge livestock shows in Brookings this summer that probably played for a total of 4,000 people that came and went from all over the country. We've got in Cedar Rapids, we had what I think was the first post-COVID arena concert inside 3 weeks ago. Josh Turner, a young country artist. We played 850 people in an 8,500 seat arena. But made a little money. The promoter was happy. The band and the artist was ecstatic. We've got 3 or 4 Christmas concerts in the 1,700 seat theater lined up. Just as you were doing the dance recitals and dance competitions, we've done those at Stevens Auditorium in Ames and at Topeka Performing Arts Center. Well, we have arenas that are waiting because hockey teams aren't going to play. We've got concerts that aren't touring. But in every place, we're finding a way to do everything we possibly can to be able to. We had in Kennewick, Washington, working with the National Guard, we were the food pantry for the whole area, for weeks, just driving people through all these chains that they were going through to drive through for these food pickups that we were packing, that we were storing, that we were processing. So all over the map.
Okay, so let's continue on, Brian, so that we can get through your budget, because
Absolutely.
I think one of the challenges is how do we, with all of the uncertainties, where are the where do we look at indicators in terms of pivoting and making a different decision?
Sure, sure. I will just briefly go through the programming update, the slide that shows what we've had since we reopened in July, and I'll just point out we've had 4 dance competitions, 6 business meetings, 3 community civic events, and 4 ticketed events and 2 virtual events. Those were art gallery exhibits that we're working with our exhibitors in the art gallery to do virtual events. And coming up through the end of the year, we have one more dance competition that is looking to happen, and we've got 15 ticketed events, and that number's actually gone up by 3 since, as of tomorrow, we'll be announcing the Rocky Mountain Christmas Show. It's a John Denver Christmas acoustic on December 18th and 19th. So we're seeing a lot of
Is that a virtual event?
movement. No, that will be an in-person 25% capacity concert
Okay.
that will be taking place. So, and quite a few events coming up. Our slate of first half of the year has got all of our dance competitions are in place, and we're working with them. We're ready to go, and they are too, and we've actually had some promoters adding dates to their original hold. So we're seeing some positive movement. You know, obviously not seeing the numbers that we've seen historically over the last 3 to 5 years, but given our current situation, we're seeing good movement with events. So it's very important that we continue this moving forward. We are looking, I'll go to the next slide here for our forecast. It's a year-end forecast, and I'll just go to the bottom. I just want to make a quick note. You know, this number, when I presented back in June, we were looking anywhere between a $244,000 and $362,000 operating loss based on when we were going to reopen, and that was the scenario we were looking at. At that time, under the July scenario, I was projecting a $244,000 loss. Right now, we're presenting a $243,000 loss, and this number does not include the past show that I mentioned that we had just programmed too. So we're right in line with what was presented back in June with our forecast at that point, and we hope this number will get better, and you know, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I can say it will. I'm going to show this slide quickly, and then I'll go to some of the background points. The Ames Center budget for 2021, we're looking at about total revenue of $817,000. Our expenses are about $964,000, projecting a loss of $147,000 for fiscal year 21. The budget is built on the current guidelines of 25% event capacity throughout the entire year of 2021. We did, in the budget, put in the Experience Burnsville office lease. They had proposed that we'd look at a 50% reduction in that fee for the lease in 2021, and I did plug that in, and I would like to recommend that it be something that we do look at moving forward. I think it's important for our continued partnership with Experience Burnsville, and to be able to keep them in their office space and accommodate that. We're going to also continue to keep our 3 full-time employees through the end of the year. That said, if we do experience some larger workloads, or if we start seeing lifted restrictions on the event capacities, we will have to look at identifying future full-time staffing needs, but that'll be something we address and work with city staff and team on as we feel would warrant based on the business. And just to highlight what we said before, we do see multiple event formats that can work underneath this 25%, and we're aggressively pursuing that.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Just a question.
Yes. Dan?
Brian, you're assuming only a 25% capacity for the entire year of 2021, which is about as worst-case scenario as I think we can probably draw, right? I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, but there's a lot of things that have happened that we've learned in the last 7 months or so of COVID with vaccinations and trials and that kind of stuff coming out. So what would happen if the dial was turned up, you know, sometime in first quarter to 50% capacity? What does that do to that 147 if you're allowed to have twice as many as currently allowed?
You know, that changes our revenue projections considerably.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were really figuring that by the beginning of January 1 of 2021, we'd be at least at a 50% capacity at that point. And I'd put together, the original draft budget did showcase that, and going into a 75% capacity by mid-year. What it does is it puts us in a lot better position, and, it opens up the door for different level of artists that might be on the bubble with a 25% capacity to saying 50%. Then within a couple months, we should be able to program more in for, whether it's in second quarter, but for sure into the second half of the year. And we're looking at, if I was gonna break up our artist users into three categories, we've got the ones that can make it work in 25%. A lot of them would like to go into the 50% category, but you do have the ones that really can only make it work in 50%. And then we have the other ones, which are the larger touring events that are in 75, but realistically probably in the 80 to 85 range. Right. So it just opens up the door for more and gives our current users more opportunity to generate revenue for them too.
Great. So that kind of gets to another question, but just that size of performer, ticket price, and what capacity requirements to make that work. So I'm guessing your phone's gonna be ringing, and you'll be ringing a lot of people if at some point in the future Minnesota allows 50%. There's gonna be a Katie bar the door flurry of phone calling and contacts to capitalize on connections and networks that you've built to get some acts booked right away. How quickly, I mean, I know you book out as much as 6 months a year on a normal basis, but how quickly can you respond, or how quickly do performances, whether it's plays or concerts, how quickly can they, or maybe even have they, said that they can turn around if they get if you get 50% and you give a phone call? I mean, in the best case scenario, how soon can you have them on stage?
I would say probably within a month and a half, 2 months.
That's pretty fast.
It's fast, and it's faster than normal. And I can use an example of our.
I'm sure they're just a little hungry to perform too.
Everyone is very eager to get back to work, and when we were faced with this back at the beginning of June, I mean, the outbound calls from our team and our communication was immediate. And once we had it, within minutes of just a quick cursory review of the guidelines, we were sending them all PDFs of those guidelines with emails and follow-up phone calls that afternoon. And what we thought was gonna be a quiet Friday turned into a real busy afternoon. And but we're thrilled, and it really opened up the door. And that example that I can showcase from that is we didn't really feel dance competitions were gonna be able to survive or exist. And we found out once we had the capacities in place and they could review the guidelines, they said, we can make this work. Might not be able to make that work, but we can compensate somewhere else and go that direction. The Rocky Mountain Christmas show that I just referenced that we're gonna officially announce tomorrow and go on sale Friday with, that came up Thursday. So we're less than a week and we're already on sale. So things are moving a lot faster than they typically do. And being that we are open for business, and many facilities right now might not be, that gives us the advantage too as we're moving forward.
Yeah. I'm going to go to Dan Gustafson first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think for the purposes of our conversation tonight and our business planning, we have to plan on worst-case scenario and how do we make it work on the worst case? And should somehow it change, which we'd all like to see happen at some point, it's a bonus for us. But I think our planning for at least the next 6 months or so is we gotta look at what we're living with right now.
Which is
and
what they just
to answer another one of your questions, regional local bands can get booked in pretty quick, and they can start operating really quick. I mean, it's the national stuff I get, but a lot of the local ones, you can fill up, you can do capacity in just a few weeks, really. You can make that happen.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. Steve?
The other thing is that the big national tours, the big Broadway shows, and the big shows that play downtown are not gonna be out there. So, I mean, you've got something of a competitive edge for a while too, because they, the money that goes into advancing those huge tours, they're not gonna take a risk. And what I'm hearing is a lot of those aren't even gonna be available till 2022.
Yeah. So, Steve, how are you handling Chanhassen? Because Chanhassen's been open.
We're doing local bands, just like Dan said. Yeah, we're doing, but the ones we used to do in the 200
And you're
seat
filling
hall,
up with the local bands?
well, as much as we
With the
can.
25%
We can do
capacity?
25% of 575. We moved those into the big room because we couldn't run the big Broadway shows we normally do in the
Yeah.
big room for only 150 people or whatever it is, 145 people. So we're doing bands out there and doing those in the to 144. Instead of, we don't have 200 capacity like we normally have, but we have 145 or something like that.
Okay. Vince?
Thank you. Are those selling out? Are those, I mean, are you hitting your mark on
Okay.
those shows?
25%?
I understand the capacity, but of the 25% that you're offering, are those going quickly?
Some are, yeah, I wouldn't say all of them, but some are, yeah. You only have a few, and people are hungry to go see something, yeah.
That's
And we're able to spread them out, we have table seating there, so you can spread people out. This booth is empty, then there's a booth that's got people in it. And, yeah, they've been doing fine.
Can I add to
Yeah.
that? When we did the release sessions,
Yeah.
almost all of our night shows sold out throughout that whole 58 show series that we did.
It's pretty clear
And you had a
that,
limited capacity also?
yeah,
250, that's all we could have in
it's
there.
become
80
pretty
cars,
clear that
250.
artists are dying to, maybe I rephrase it.
Yeah, you should rephrase that.
Artists are craving to get back on stage, and they are taking advantage of opportunities. And as evidenced by the release session, people are craving to get out of the house and go see a show, right?
Yeah,
So,
the public wants to be out there. I mean, that's.
As long
for
as they
sure.
feel safe.
Yeah, you're right, the social distance, you have to follow the protocols.
Okay. All right, Brian, let's move this along because I already have a text that we're going to have to take a break before we go to the next one.
Okay, I'll make this quick.
Well, we have some decisions to make.
me. I usually have to pee, but it's not me this time.
I'll run through, I only have 2 slides, I'm just gonna run through there. Obviously, it has been some discussion of, one option of just since, we're not operating at the level we have been in past years of what the impact of closing Ames Center would be. And I just have some bullet points here. There is always gonna be an occupancy regardless of whether the facility is being utilized or not. And that number, I have 265 here, that was a percentage of what was presented to the city of 312,000. So that number, I think is a very safe estimate of what those total expenses would be. No revenues offsetting that, but just as an expense. We also have, there'd be the impact of losing the current Ames Center staff, the team that we have in place. It does impact our current and future sponsorship, potential loss of current and future sponsorships, and that very well could include naming rights. I'm not saying it would, but it is something that we'd want to look at as a potential liability. Lost programming business in the 22 and 23 is a big one. We have a lot of momentum going as we do look at booking larger shows into those years and continue that momentum. We are working 6 months, 12 months, even sometimes 24 months out in the future. Calls today I was on, we were talking about the 21-22 and 22-23 seasons. So they're, especially now with COVID, things are going out a lot further and people are feeling more comfortable at their venues of securing their acts that far out, assuming that things are going to be better. And we'll continue, obviously we'd have more operating deficits and for the next 2 to 3 years with that. The other part, and I think it's just something that really have to look at here, is the negative economic impact on small businesses that utilize the Ames Center. Those and the others, such as hotels, restaurants, and dance studios here, not only in Burnsville, but in the South Metro area. The users of the Burnsville, or of the Ames Center are small businesses. They are promoters that really rely on us to be open to be able to conduct their business, and essentially with many of the venues across the country closed, we've got a great opportunity to be able to keep them in business the best we can. So the plan going forward is it's critical and more financially beneficial to stay open. We've got great momentum going right now and we want to keep that moving. Burnsville is pro-business, as I said. Our clients do need to know that Burnsville stands behind small businesses and that we are that support the Ames Center and that we are going to continue to move forward as much as we can. We're going to continue to we're going to start working on some capital improvement projects, pick some of those projects up. Carpeting is one of those. And just as I mentioned before, events are programmed 6 to 24 months in advance. But the reality is we want to thrive right now. We're not here for survival. We want to thrive. And we can continue to do so, and it gives us the best chance of recovery continue on the direction and with the momentum that we have currently. So that said, I am done with my presentation.
So, Brian and Melanie and Jenny, one of the things in our agreement is that to look at this in a true partnership. So you've reduced your management fee. Okay.
Correct. We have, beginning with COVID this year, we reduced or eliminated our incentive fees that are built off of achieving goals and also on revenue measurements. Those we just did right out of the gate. We wanted to be able to assist where we could to take that pressure off financially, and felt it was important to do so. Beginning this month in October, we've also waived our base management fee by $2,000 a month, and that amount is getting carried over into the 2021 budget. And our base management fees, that amount's being carried over, that monthly, continued, thank you. And typically, under our contract, we do have a 3% increase on our base management fees on an annual basis, but we've not made that increase going into 2021. So we have really gone down in those fees to assist in, knowing that we're not operating at the levels for events that we have in the past, and wanted to make that contribution back to the community.
Okay. So I think one of the things that, from the city's perspective, is to understand what is the acceptable maximum amount of operational loss and taxpayer-funded support for the Ames Center. And I understand, Councilmember Gustafson, you had some ideas as to how we can look at revenue increases
I do.
that can help.
I go back to this in June,
Yeah.
when we started learning about how we could do things with COVID, and we created the relief sessions, which turned out to be hugely successful for us. I've watched what's going on out at the Chan, which they're doing. I know most of the musicians that play out there, and you're right. Some shows do great, and some say not so much, but they do. But I've come to the conclusion, and originally we started talking about closing the theater, and something I didn't want to do, but well, it might have been the right business decision for us. But as I continued to kind of brainstorm with this and kind of think it through, I think there's some things that can happen out there that can put more shows into the Ames Center, help mitigate some of the losses, hopefully, and understand that maybe some investment we're going to have to do with personnel in there so they can actually service these shows. But I think long-term, it keeps the Ames Center front and center in front of the entertainment community. And as things do dial down at some point, which we all know it's going to happen at some point, it puts us in a favorable position to, instead of spending several $100,000s to ramp up again, we're already there ramping as society's ramping, and as these shows are ramping, and as these people are touring. I know a lot of national artists, most of them aren't touring right now, but they want to, and they will once they feel it's good for them to do it again. And I don't want to take us out of the spotlight. In Burnsville here, we all of us did a great job of finding ways to make things happen for our citizens and for the metro area. And we got recognition for that. People looked at us and said, yeah, these guys got it figured out. I mean, we got some blogs on that, which was kind of cool. So it was nice. I don't want to lose that momentum.
Okay.
But we also have to be willing to do some investment spending. And I think we need to find out if we have anything in how we look at this or how we think about this that prevents Brian and Venue Works from making this more successful. I think it's kind of like you have to take the cuffs off a little bit and just let them go with it. In my mind, it's right now how I would like to see Venue Works work is they manage the theater, they book it, they market it, and they service it. And I'm not saying throw away the financial, but on the other hand, be prudent about it. But I think they can make things happen where we won't lose as much money, than if we would if we closed. to be honest with you. I think it's just gonna be more expensive for it to close it and then have to ramp it back up again. And that could be several $100,000 for us. And I would rather spend that money doing something and helping this theater provide, do the mission that it was built for. And that was to provide entertainment for our community and the surrounding communities behind us. And in this pandemic and what's going on, I was out at these sessions every day. Just the smiles on people's faces, how happy they were just to be out doing something. I don't think we can take that away from them. And this winter, I especially don't think we can take that away from them. So I'd like us to look at things with a different lens, and I'm not sure how that lens is yet, and I'm not sure how we get in their way. But if we do, let's figure out how to get out of their way.
And maybe Brian can take a look at all of that also together with staff and probably folks like you who is in the industry. I'm going to go to Keely and then I'm going to go to Melanie.
I'll reserve my question for later. I
Okay.
like this line of dialogue is, I think, something I'd like to pursue a little bit. And it sounds like, so does our city manager Lee. She had her hands up.
Okay, Melanie.
Madam Mayor and Council, within our staff packet, you saw the iterations that have been pursued over the last several months. So Councilmember Gustafson, closure was never top of the list. That is not a preferred
I knew that. I
option
knew
for
that.
anybody. And so, but I think the reality is we had everything on the table, that when we worked with Brian and we worked with Steve, what is on the table? What is our exposure? What are the pros and cons of every approach? And so that's really the lens that we're taking to this. And we know more now than when we prepared our preliminary budget. We knew more then than we did when the original budget as presented by VenueWorks came forward. So as we've talked about since COVID came about in March, this has been an iterative process. It has been messy. It has been complicated. It has been fraught with difficult conversations. At the end of the day, we know that an occupied building is a benefit for the community. And we also know that we have the overall operations that we need to balance with this. So that's the needle that we're trying to thread, is the operational exposure with the desire to keep it going. And so what I think from my perspective, I would welcome the council's openness to is the ability to have, what is that threshold for which which is financial, that support, because that tips over into the rest of our operations. We'll make it happen. And this has nothing to do with whether Brian is working hard or VenueWorks is a talented company. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with a global pandemic. And so we've been meeting several times a week for several months with both Steve and Brian, Tim, and others on how to get the information we need to be able to come together for a collaborative approach, for a collaborative proposal to move forward. That's everybody's goal.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's a great goal. I think what we need to understand then as we move forward is, because we have in place some of the principles that we've operated on, Melanie, what happens when this new information comes and how do we pivot and make a different direction?
Indeed, that's what we've been doing through, absolutely.
Yeah. And so the thing is, let's also take a look in a partnership, because partnerships have always been strong, and VenueWorks is a partner, and we need to work collaboratively for the good not only of VenueWorks, but especially for the Ames Center and staying open. So we know what those issues are right now and where we're going, but what happens as we go forward? So all of these ideas, like the one that Dan Gustafson has put on the table, I think are opportunities for revenue sources that Steve, you've said is working in Chanhassen. So how about doing some of that modeling? And if that's an aspect that can help and work at the Ames Center, because we've all seen how successful the relief sessions have been. So if that's an idea that can garner more revenue, because all we're looking at is what are the revenue sources that we can get. But at the end of the day, if things happen, we need to know what that indicator is that indicator that says to us, okay, what's the next decision when we hit a point where that happens? Steve?
I'll also remind you that our current contract, we obligated ourselves to invest $25,000 in what was then going to be a market analysis that we've never done. So if we wanted, it'd be up to you, but if you wanted to take that, we'd be glad to put that $25,000 in to 2021 as a cushion against that, $147,000, if that's what ends up being budgeted. Be up to
Thank you,
but we could do that.
that's generous, yes. I think that, we can do surveys afterwards. After we get on the other side and there's a vaccine,
right.
We can do that, but as we move towards this can help. But I think we need to agree, members of the council, that what I'm hearing is keep the Ames Center open. Now, Dan Keeley is going, and then Workman.
I'll defer to the first
Okay,
one.
you go first then.
Why do you want to go last, Dan?
Yeah,
No,
I'll go.
yeah, you go.
Refocus. So the question is what is our
Well,
tolerance?
press your button again so I don't miss you.
oh, okay.
What is our tolerance as a council for losses, and what do we propose to do to keep an eye on that as we go forward? I know Dan G said, maybe we just get out of the way and let them go, and I don't want to impede on their ability to operate and thrive and not survive. But if we're looking at the numbers and continuing a collaboration, I don't think it would be a horrible idea to stay close and look at those numbers, what's booked, what's been executed on at least a monthly basis for a little bit, not with any looming threat or anything, but just so we can keep an eye on things, as we walk and then jog and then sprint out of this. Because I don't want to be at this point next year talking about our budget with a $243,000 deficit and having to talk about a point or two on a levy. And I'm not saying any of this out of a lack of confidence for Brian. I just think maybe if we're going to be cautious, then it makes sense to at least be cautious to watch and monitor, maybe on a little bit more regular basis right away. And as things start steamrolling, we step back and we go back to business as normal. But it's just something that I
Vince,
had
that's
talked
how
about
we
with Melanie.
operated at the very beginning when we started. And then because the Ames Center opened during the recession in 2009. So we did. We always had the Ames Center management talking with us. So you're not proposing something that we haven't done. It just is making sure that we put that in place, and Brian comes and talks to us, and so we're aware of that. So that's something that we can, again, institute to have that sense of comfort that that we're all in this together. We're all in this together, and we want the Ames Center to continue to operate and then to thrive. But for me, I still want to understand, if it starts to dial back, all of us needs to know we come back to the table very quickly and say, what now? Because, as Melanie says, what we look at is the entirety of our budget and our obligation to the people of Burnsville and the businesses. So, but I think what you're proposing, Vince, is something we can go back to and do that. Dan, now, did you want to be last? Because Kara just pressed her button. Do you want Kara to go first before you?
And I'm going to press my button again.
Sure, everybody can go and I'll go last,
Okay.
because
Kara,
that's what
you
a
go.
gentleman does.
Kara, you go.
And so this question is for you, Mayor. And I know, yes, we definitely should watch on all of this as events unfold. In the latest statements, our governor has said that he does not at this point foresee placing restrictions down or going back to a strict
Yeah.
lockdown. But I also know that you are speaking with a group of mayors and with the governor. And I'm hearing you say a couple of times about, well, what if this happens? We're having a surge. What if it locks down?
No.
Are you hearing something
No.
different from what is being reported, like, as a public statement?
No,
Do you have the inside scoop?
Yeah, matter of fact, the governor's office have been very good about responding to me. I had a phone call with them, I shared with Melanie. You know, they heard us and they thanked us for the letter and the resolution. So that was the phone call back and saying, we're working, we're watching everything, we're working with the restaurateurs and all of that. But also over the weekend, Dr. Burke was here. And then you have Wisconsin surging, you have the Dakotas, both Dakotas are surging, and Iowa. And we're not quite as surged as high as that, because I did ask Brian about the Ames Center and if we can go to 50%. He heard that, so he had Patrick call me back. And so we'll continue to work on that. So just having a good relationship and an open dialogue in all of that helps a great deal. So.
Have you heard, I know the chamber is working on some initiatives asking for the governor for some changes in the executive orders. And one of them was asking about why have a blanket capacity when you could just have 6-foot distancing, that type of thing. But there was another question, which was, can you change your capacity requirements based on either the air exchange rate or the filtration system of the building itself, similar to how airplanes are now able to have absolute full capacity because of the ventilation system that they have and the air exchange rate that they're able to do. And I was wondering, have you heard about anything going forward in that initiative? Because that might be something, especially with the Ames Center is a newer facility, and the filtration system and the air exchange rate in that building is excellent. I mean, it is extremely highly rated. And since that's why you're able to have more people at outdoor events, right? Because you have the circulation, all that kind of stuff. Can they get an exemption based on something like that? Have you heard if that is being pushed forward or if that's something we could do?
They're all looking at all of those things, and the scientists from the U and from Mayo have all been part of that discussion. I think there's a great deal of openness to understand what are these operational standards that we can look at. So, yeah, what I'm doing, Kara, is working with them and looking at how we can move towards our goals and how that can be done.
Well, I definitely appreciate that you're doing that. And hopefully our governor will start to look at some of these things that we could do for businesses, especially when they've been shown to be safe in other industries. Why would they not be safe in this one? It seems kind of absurd. And also, and I know you're a proponent of local control, because I know one of the pushbacks has been, how on earth would the state do this? Like, how could they do all these exemptions? And I mean, like, I don't want to speak for the rest of council, but I would say if you would turn local control to us, we would be happy to do that. Like, we would be happy to say, yes, your filtration system meets this guideline, we're going to sign off, you can be at fuller capacity. So please trust your local people, Governor, and I know our mayor is willing to jump on this and return local control. That would be excellent. And
There's
I know
a
you're a
lot
big
of things.
proponent for
There's a
that.
lot of things, and I think I'll be talking with Brian. The state is going to has asked, and I talked to Melanie about this, to use the Ames Center for COVID testing. So we'll wait. Brian's going to be talking with the real estate folks. Huh?
Don't we have a lot of medical facilities that aren't even currently being used for COVID testing that
Well,
could be
this is
COVID
coming out
tested?
of it, so, hey, we want the rent money.
Well, well, we do have a black box theater that would make a
So
perfect setting for that,
anyway,
maybe.
they did call me today, or text me today, and so we'll continue to work on those things. So Dan, you wanna, you are, everybody else has spoken, it's you. You wanted to be last.
The cleanup hitter. Well, I want to follow up with a question, but then I want to build off of comments that Mr. Workman made. During the PPP period of time, were you open or closed for a portion or most of that PPP payroll?
During the time the PPP funds were, that 8-week period, we were closed.
Okay.
At that point.
I imagine a lot of cleaning got done.
Yes.
In addition to the phone calls and everything else that, you know, because we also, you know, a lot of businesses did, obviously. Was there any, I mean, did you call Melanie, city manager Lee, and say, hey, I've got some staff, they're covered, I'm closed, what can I help with? You know what I mean?
Actually, in one of the meetings that we had, it was brought up if we had the resources and staffing to assist with city and various city departments. And so we did volunteer our team to work. A good portion of them were actually at the golf course during this time frame and helped out there when they reopened. And I know they were extremely busy and were able to pitch in there. So no, we did go through for the first few weeks of getting the building back in order, going through a lot of our summertime punch lists that we have, and then that came up, and yeah, we did think that was fine to be able to do that, and that did also showcase some additional cost savings to the city for that labor, because that was also with the PPP funding, that was not at the cost as an operational expense for Ames Center, so that was complimentary.
Oh, thank you, that was great. That's a very partnership type of thing to do, and I'm glad that you got together and did that.
I'm glad we could help, yeah.
Other than that, is there anything else that, I mean, this is more of a global question. Is there anything else that you had to do to adapt that you haven't covered in your presentation, or did you pretty much cover everything that you had? Because we got into a lot of that sort of discussion earlier on, but I just want to make sure that, you know, we got all the points, you know, that we were able to hear all the points that what you did to adapt during COVID, I guess the last 7 months.
You know, I think we're able to cover most of it with, you know, what we're able to do, especially with the adapting with the new procedures and the new equipment and working with staff. You know, a lot of the adapting was making reductions too and cutting the expenses. I mean, that was really the first, that was our primary objective at that point, was to be able to reduce expenses as fast as we could and then rebuild as we're going forward. I don't think there's anything else that I can think of at this point. I'd be happy to share it with council if there is, if I think of something after the fact, but unless, Steve, did you have something you wanted to?
Well, we did develop a return-to-work program for employees that was consistent with all the CDC guidelines and everything. Then we developed the program we called Secure, but it was, how do you bring all the audience people back, and what are you doing, and what does all that entail? And one other thing that you'd see if you did come to an event that's a little different from before, because we didn't mention it, but we're not doing intermissions, and we're not doing concessions. So we got a pop machine, and that's about it, but we're not doing concessions, and we're running shows without intermissions. That's just one less traffic jam that you can avoid for the possible spread of the virus.
Sure.
People moving around.
Well, and it's unfortunate that you can't do concessions, because concession type
see that as
retail
moving up
is
as the
happening
next step.
everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Concessions are going on at the grocery store by the thousands every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would hope that you could, you know, just put some dots on the floor and bring that revenue stream back, even at the 25%, using the same theory that every retailer has done, right? Just
Yeah, and once we see the business move just a little bit more, and we have a full slate of dance competitions coming up in the first half of the year. I mean, really, the focus is to really identify that strategy here over the
Sure.
next month or so, so that my goal is to have that back operating in '21, so we have it.
Great.
I have to also be cautious too on what we have for resources and ability to provide it as a,
true.
significant amount of
Right.
work. You have to bring a separate
Staff.
workforce
Right.
and staffing, scheduling, training, inventory management, and such too. So, but that's like one of the next steps that we're gonna be
Great.
reviewing, absolutely.
My final comment is really to council, and a couple weeks ago, I floated an idea as a byproduct of this discussion being on our agenda and coming up. It sort of hit me without thinking of it, that when we dissolved the commission, we also dissolved our liaison assignment to the Ames Center. And I think I was a little surprised that I just kind of forgot about it, right? That it just sort of went with it. And I think we were remiss in doing so because we do not have any other asset in the city that's anything like the Ames Center. It is a very unique standalone deal. And it requires a different type of management and oversight. Obviously, we hire the experts to manage and drive the revenues and run the operation, but I think it's important for us as council to stay close to it, just like we do a lot of our other assignments. So I let City Manager Lee know that I think we ought to have the discussion of bringing back that liaison position. And I think tonight I want to, based on the discussion that we've had and your comments, Vince, about, staying in more closer contact, that really kind of plays right into it. So I would like to have a discussion on our next work session to talk about that, and I'm going to suggest that we bring the liaison assignment back so that Melanie or whoever from staff is going to be at discussions with Brian, that a council member is present, to help guide this process and stay a little more plugged in and a little more in tune with what's going on. At the same time, I don't want that idea to overshadow any sort of a direction that Vince might have been going on just having more scheduled meetings where there's presentations given to the whole council. This is a $20 million unique asset. Not very many cities have this large of one of our size. I mean, Minneapolis has several theaters, and they have a theater district, and they hire outside professional, everybody, because it's so huge, because they have so many. State, Orpheum, Pantages, and all the other ones. But for cities of the size of Burnsville, a 1,000-seat performing arts center is a unique animal. And I think it bears the responsibility of us as council and staff to be paying closer attention, kind of like we did with the commission. Like I said, when we dissolved the commission, because the commission didn't really have any purpose anymore, we kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater. Right? We should have kept that liaison. In retrospect, I wish I'd have thought about it. I would have said, okay, I understand the commission doesn't have any real mission anymore, but we need to stay close. This is a unique asset. We need to stay close with it.
Yeah, I'd like to have that discussion. One of the things I don't want to have lost in all of this is that staff has to be a part of all of that.
Absolutely.
Because,
yeah, it's liaison and staff.
Yeah, so it's because it's important. We're looking at our budget, but I still want to get back to, we are at 147 for 21 loss. My hope is that as we get to 22, when we look at the 22 budget, that's reduced and not go up. So where will be the pressure points that we need to understand? And I think that's a discussion we all have to have as we move forward. So we all agree on what that pressure point is, and whether it's, every other month that we sit down and take a look and see how things are going. Are the programs that you had scheduled, are they still on track? Or are you losing some? Are you adding other revenue sources? So that we can continue to move to thrive, a plan of thriving. And so but we need to do that. Because I think all of us, you folks and us, want to make sure that the Ames Center stays open and move towards thriving. But we have to make sure that all of us, along with our staff, know what that pressure point is, where we have to stop and make a different decision. And that 147 needs to be reduced. And you've done that before, and we got to black, so let's continue to move in that direction. Melanie?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Keeley had asked for the liaison position to be discussed at the all-day work session. We certainly can bring it forward ahead of that, but that was already slotted for that all-day work session.
Yeah, I'd like to have it next month in November at the work session,
Okay,
if the council supports us.
sure, yeah, okay.
And then what I heard from the council is that the 147 is the maximum exposure the council's comfortable with for 2021, just as a guidance for the council, knowing that, or guidance for staff, knowing that we're gonna be kind of keeping an eye, working with Brian and being in close touch.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much.
yeah. Dan Gustafson?
The 147 is good. We have to consider, because they may have to ramp up if we do a lot more shows, that might possibly go up. In which case, we need to look at how do we use that angel fund? And that's
Well,
part of why that angel
yeah,
fund's
that's
there.
what we need to do, probably use the angel
So
fund
they have
to
be-
ramp
They have
up.
to have the ability to just use that angel fund when they need to use it for different things,
Yeah,
and not have to keep going back and forth.
we
all the
need to
time.
amend that policy then.
We do.
We just approved, Brian and I, there's a show coming in that's an angel fund policy, so we maybe want to talk about what amendment.
No, but I'm just
policy-
saying, if they start doing a lot of shows, Brian might be coming in every day saying, I got another show we're talking about angel fund on, and so we'd have to, and we have to all, I really want us to all think about this, if we're gonna invest in keeping this open and keeping it going, there is a possibility it could go by 147, I think our eyes have to be wide open about that.
Absolutely. And that's why I keep saying, where do we hit the pressure points? But the angel fund is a fund that can be used.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
my
I'm-
my light's on.
I know, but Kara's before you.
Some people are quicker on the button.
I have it right here.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
That's fine to do the discussion on whether we should do a council liaison. I believe the idea was that we were dissolving it, not because we didn't want to liaison with the Ames Center, but because we had ideas that we were going to have an arts commission, of which the Ames Center was going to be a portion of that, but not just restricted to the Ames Center. And so it was going to be a commission that was going to come back as something larger than it was. So I just throw that out there on the discussion of, are we still doing that? Or what are we doing?
Because one of the things that we talked about is that the Burnsville Community Foundation has been doing a lot of the arts piece of it. And so if we're going to go down that road, they have to be at the table. So what does the Art Commission do, and what does that mean in terms of staff work in supporting the Arts Commission? I think that's, and I think it just went away because Burnsville Community Foundation was doing public art and some other things, and the Ames Center was still booking artists when they want a show. And so you still have that relationship with the artists around town who want to book a show.
Correct.
All right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. This is in the same
It's in
conversation?
the same conversation about
Okay,
the Art Commission.
okay.
Actually, the talk of the Art Commission was within the Ames Commission, and it was the members of the Ames Commission that talked about creating their own Arts Commission, and
And
they
it
were
went
gonna
over-
go on their own and do that.
Yes, you're
And then
right.
come back and talk to us about it.
But they
Which is the way it
dropped
went
the
down,
ball.
But they didn't do that, and
Yeah.
so an Arts Commission it was never something that we as a council or city said, yeah,
No.
let's do
No.
a commission. It was actually the commission that voted to disband.
Exactly.
Wanted to expand their role, but then they
Yeah,
didn't do it.
yeah.
COVID might have interrupted that
No,
plan.
that was
No, it
long
wasn't.
before.
Long
COVID.
before.
We've gotten rid
Yeah.
of this commission, what, 2 years ago?
Well, actually, the commission.
Was it 2 years?
Yeah, it's been 2 or 3 years
Yeah,
since we've.
the
been
commission,
with this commission.
yeah, the commission came to us and they said that they thought that their work was
They had done their
done.
job, yeah.
And they
Yeah.
didn't see that they had a role to play in it and to be purposeful, because Brian and staff had been doing a great job
Exactly.
of running the Ames Center, so.
I was the
they
liaison for
came-
many years. I
Yeah.
was there, I was the first liaison, and I was the last liaison.
Yeah,
so-
well, you never left that.
No, I know. Well, I
Yeah.
did for a little while, but.
Okay, I'm going to go to Melanie and then to Dan, because I'm doing the rotation
Thank you,
here.
sorry, I didn't.
You'll be the last one again, you'll have the last word.
Maybe.
Okay, can we do that with all of our meetings, just make him the last
Yeah,
word?
no.
Okay, Melanie.
Well, Madam Mayor and Council, I appreciate the discussion here. I think it's very helpful. One thought that I have is, as I hear the council suggestions about kind of reimagining and being open, perhaps it's a good exercise for us to walk through kind of the vision and of the Ames Center and the mission and those kind of foundational documents, similar to what we've done with some of our other foundational documents over the last year and a half, 2 years. And that way we can provide clear direction to Brian and VenueWorks, and the council can be clear about what their vision is for it, and we're all can work from the same page. So perhaps that's a logical next step.
Oh, it is, because there was a purpose statement and a mission statement and so forth, so if we can dig up all of that stuff,
Yeah, we have it.
yeah.
So meanwhile,
Yeah.
these guys will be open to take an individual basis on every show they do, and they'll
Yeah,
work out the
and-
details with all the groups.
And we can amend that angel
Yeah, we
fund
can amend the angel
policy.
fund policy as well.
Yeah. Dan Kay, the floor is yours.
I'm gonna need a point of clarification from what Gustafson just said after you're done.
Go ahead,
Go
I'll
ahead
yield
and
to that, because
clarify
let's
what you're
clarify
saying,
that.
Dan G.
What do you want me to clarify?
Can you just, can you say what you just said at least? We're not asking them to check in on a per show basis.
No, what we're doing is allowing Brian to do Brian. We don't want to get into the detail of how they book the shows and what they do. They do that. We just allow them to just, on every individual basis, they can just do what they have to do with
He's
all
the
these shows.
industry
Right,
expert,
okay.
Yeah.
not us.
Thank you, I misunderstood, but
He's the
That's what I'm
industry,
trying to
I
get
agree
across. is,
100%.
There you go.
yeah, he's the industry expert, not us. Okay, now you gotta make it fast, because this person who wanted us to.
And it is not me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, a couple things. I think there's some guidance that Brian operates with regard to the Angel Fund. What I hear Councilmember Gustafson saying is, we need to loosen that up a little bit. We need to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, I think was the word that you used earlier, or before the meeting. And now I knew
So
what you
amend the
mean.
policy.
Yes, to give them more latitude to take more risks at a time when it's necessary, just like in the beginning, why we created the Angel Fund. To get the thing going, you need to take some risks to develop your reputation and bring acts in. So we need to do that. So a little bit of this is hit the button and start all over and do some of the things we did 10 years ago. I just want to close out by saying I believe in Brian, I believe in VenueWorks, and I believe in the $20 million asset that we bought and paid for and built. Well, not 100% paid for yet, but still paying for it. And so if it's 147 or if it goes higher, we have the financial resources to cover if it goes higher. And to Dan's point, absolutely, it might, because they have to take some more risk, especially as they expand. And so I don't have a problem. I'm not gonna put them on the hook to say it's 147 or, there's some ultimatum. I think it's 147 is the goal, and we already know through the last many years of performance, if anybody's gonna do it, they'll do it. And if they can't, then it's humanly impossible because there are things outside of their control. But we still have the ability to keep that facility open as long as the governor's going to allow anybody in the door, right? And 25% is not very much. I'm thrilled that they've been able to book acts and make some things happen. On 25%, that's a really small percentage. And so I expect that's gonna go to 50, and it's gonna really open up the doors. And so, I'm not expecting the 147 to automatically drop if we go to 50% capacity, to Dan's point, but I am 100% bought in and supporting whatever it takes to keep our Ames Center open and thriving throughout this entire period of time, and giving Brian all the tools necessary to make that happen. One of the things that we screwed up on when we built it is we didn't put a marketing budget in place. You remember that?
Yes, I know, and.
We were
yeah.
right to the dollar on 20
Yeah.
million and then
Yeah.
said, and I remember Councilmember Gus and I were up here talking
Yeah.
and going,
Yeah, I remember.
what? There's no money to market it?
I
How
know.
is anybody gonna know
Yeah,
it's this?
I remember.
So, you know, there are tools that we need to provide and they cost money. But that's how we make sure that we get out of the hole faster and that we thrive faster as everything continues to open up. So I appreciate your presentation and I appreciate your partnership. I think that's thrilling that you had staff availability and offered it up to the city during PPP when, you know, you were closed. So I appreciate that. That's the kind of thing that partners do. So, thank you.
Okay, I think, Melanie, then you're clear with what you're hearing the council, keep the Ames Center open, 147, we know going into 21, but we're still going to continue to work together to make sure that we continue the discussion. As I said, you know, what are those pressure points? And if things change, we have to have a conversation.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, staff understands.
Yeah. All right,
Time
Thank
for
you.
a potty break?
yeah, and now we will
Was it
recess.
Was that you?
We'll recess for 7 minutes.
I demand to know who
Who
has
was it?
impunity is well fed. He will survive the famine times.
Yeah.
Mabel approves.
He's definitely got that gene from me, so.
So, before we get back on the air, how did you drive when you worked for the city?
Okay, I will
We're on
now
the air now.
reconvene the Burnsville work session, city council work session. And the next item on the agenda is the police accountability legislation presentation. And our chief, Tanya Schwartz, is presenting.
Yay.
Good evening. Yeah, it's you again.
Yes, we're down to, there's just a few of us
Yep,
left. right?
everybody left
A few of us
except-
remain,
Yeah.
so. Okay, I'm just getting my clicker here. Keep my mask on until I. Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I've got an update for you on our Police Accountability Act. So you're familiar with the legislation a little bit, but I'm going to go over essentially what was adopted in the legislation, and then what we currently are in line with, and then areas that we may need to work on to come in line with the legislation. So there's about 23 sections of changes on police accountability. So there's a wide range of options there. We'll go over a lot of this high level and just to explain to you what our process is here at the police department, so we can ensure compliance as all the dates come forward, excuse me, to where those are. So, one of the main things that the legislation talked about was use of certain restraints. And so the adopted legislation talks about certain restraints being restricted unless there's a use of deadly force. And that would be for great bodily harm or death. And so the restrictions include no chokeholds, no tying limbs behind a person's back, so restraining a person with all their limbs behind their back, and then securing a person's face down during a transport to any kind of facility. So those are the restrictions. Currently, our policies in process right now, we're in compliance with this. We are aligned with all of those procedures. We will also be looking at the post-mandated language that will come out on this.
Can you just let our citizens know, because you've talked about this, we never trained for this.
Right.
Never
yes.
trained for chokeholds and never trained for the
Right.
knee and the neck and all of that. So so that everybody, because I've told them and I've had them go to your presentation when you had that, right during
Yes.
all of that.
Yes, so.
And the 7 can wait issues.
Yep. So these are not anything that we have changed because of the legislation yet. This is our current practice. So our current practice, we are in line with this, so we don't need to make an adjustment, but we will look at the post-mandated policy language when it comes through, just to make sure everything is looking good there. Another area of the legislation, duty to intercede. This was another area we talked about with the 8 can't wait policies, so you'll be familiar with this, but the language here is that regardless of tenure or rank, an officer is required to intercede. Okay, so when they're present and they're observing something another officer is doing that would be unauthorized force or force beyond what they need to do to get the situation under control, and what is objectively reasonable under the circumstances, they need to do that. And so our current process is we're in compliance with that. Our policy language is very similar to this. Our language is that we will promptly report to a supervisor versus a 24-hour. So the language talks about within 24 hours. Our policy currently says you will report it promptly. And so we will look at that to when that change comes, and then we can adopt that language to make that exact. So we'll look at that. But generally speaking, officers are required to report that as it stands now. Warrior style training, this was another section of 8 can't wait, but that prohibits training that would be dehumanizing to people or encourages some kind of aggressive conduct. Things that would devalue human life, constitutional rights, training like that would be seen as increasing a likelihood where officers would be more willing to use deadly force. The restrictions on this really revolve around, we wouldn't be getting post credits, so if an agency decided to do this, they wouldn't be in compliance with the statute, and you wouldn't be getting licensed credits, so the post licensing board could say, we're not gonna give you credits if you send someone to this kind of training. So that's just so we can understand what that is. And then also, if you did have some training like that was deemed to be
this is aggressive training, they may not cover the cost for that kind of training in the legislation. So currently, our current process with policy is we don't allow that kind of training. We've never trained to that type of training to devalue or dehumanize individuals. We definitely don't do that. We don't have a specific policy that calls this out to say this exact language, so we will adopt that language with the post mandates when that comes.
Great.
So we will adjust to that. Use of force reporting, so there's a lot of information around use of force reporting, and what this boils down to is, so all the CLEOs, the chiefs, have to provide information on any incidents involving use of force resulting in serious bodily harm or death. So we have to report that to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and we need to file that with, at least once a month with the forms that the BCA is gonna provide to us. So our current process right now, we're in compliance with that. We already do this, but we don't have a specific policy again that says this is what we do. So we're currently reporting that, and again, here we'll adopt the language that's specific to the policy. So we'll just be adding this in, even though it's our current practice, we'll put it into the policy to make it official that way. Autism training, again here, so this was another piece of the legislation, wanted to ensure that CLEOs were making sure every officer employed by the agency was getting autism training. They want to make sure we're having safer interactions between people with autism. And then the training will have to comply with the post-board learning objectives, and they have to meet all the requirements for our continuing education credits. And then as the CLEO, as our agency, we need to maintain the records that show, like we do with other training, what training the officers are doing, that it's completed, and that it's done within their licensing period. Currently, we don't have training specific to this. We have had officers attend training, but we don't have a specific policy for this. So again, we will adopt this language. We will train officers in autism so that we can come into compliance with that. So we will look at the licensing cycles and get officers set to do that. We'll be looking for the post board to say, here's training that is going to meet these standards, and then we can begin to send officers to that kind of training. Or look at training that may be out there currently that is post eligible for credits for this particular piece and send officers that way. So we're looking at that. There's a lot of legislation around what the BCA is going to have to do, so I'm going to go through this a little bit more quickly, but independent use of force investigations unit. So the BCA has to, let me just make sure I've got this one right. Okay, so anytime there's an incident with use of force or deadly use of force, officer-involved shootings, or any kind of criminal sexual conduct or conflict of interest cases, the BCA is kind of that authorized independent person that can come in and review those cases for us. That isn't something that we should be doing on our own. So our current policy is we do have policy on officer-involved shooting and deaths, so we have current policy. We currently already utilize the BCA for when we have had officer-involved shootings. And any kind of conflict cases, I already have that in policy where I can look to another agency or to the BCA to come in and do those investigations where we have a conflict of interest. So anytime we deem that to be appropriate. So in terms of adjustments, we'll continue to use the BCA because that's the direction we're getting. And then we'll look at that policy language, we'll look at those adjustments, work with the BCA, the county attorney to understand, are we in compliance with the legislation? So I think we're very close on that, but we just, again, we'll have to put that into the policy. Residency incentives, so there was a lot of discussion about, officers living in the communities for which they serve. And so one piece of the legislation was that, cities or counties could offer incentives to encourage folks that want to come into the profession to live in the city or the county for which they work. We do not have a specific policy that outlines residency incentives. We certainly would be open to those discussions, but we don't have any policy around that right now. That'd be a discussion we'd have with city management and all of you and staff that way. Critical incident and peer counseling. This is another area. Protections for officers when they need to go talk to peer support. Those are more protected now than they used to be. And so those emergency services, again, are provided to our first responders so that they can seek counseling or seek trauma, help for trauma or illness or whatever they might be going through, because again, we want them to be healthy, we want them to seek out that. There's, a lot of discussion around, again, having healthy officers. They're gonna have a more positive impact in the community. So our current process, we currently offer these services, as I mentioned before. So we're in good shape there. Mental health is a top priority for our organization, and we really want to get that ingrained into our culture. And we'll just continue to look at and develop strategies that we can that will help our officers make sure that they can understand and cope with what they're going through and process emotions around the work that they're going through. There's obviously a lot going on across the country, and so this is very much continue to be needed. Again, some more post board changes. Post board is basically becoming the repository for information when CLEOs and agencies have to report in on any of these mandates. So again, this is the post board that's going to have that database. And then they're also working on creating a council for ensuring police excellence and improving community relations advisory council. And so those individuals are going to be looking at policies, looking at regulating officers in a manner that serves protection of civil and human rights. So the post board is going to have this council. So that's just another piece of legislation that was in there. A few other things more on the post board. They're going to be adding more members to the board. And then they're also going to be having subcommittees to investigate actions, licensure actions, things like that. And so it's really more about just increasing their voting members and getting more diverse people onto the board at post. Other changes, chief law enforcement officer of every state and local law enforcement agency has to update their policy so it's exactly identical or very similar to the language that we've been talking about. So that's when I say, as we talk about use of force, there's going to be a mandated policy that will come out and cover all of these things from the post board. So then us as CLEOs, we need to adopt that language either identically to that, just accept it as it is, or it has to be substantially similar to that. So that's what we're working towards. Other changes with post board reporting on alleged misconduct. So starting in January of 2021, chief law enforcement officers have to submit individual officer data around misconduct or alleged misconduct to the board. And so that's looking at data for any kind of misconduct investigations. They want dispositions on involving any alleged misconduct, total numbers of types of investigations that we're doing. And then what does that look like? What are the dispositions? Are things dismissed? Why are they dismissed? What does that look like? And so for us, we are already reporting this information to the post board annually, but some language in the legislation is that CLEOs will be required to report this in more real time. So once you have a disposition on a misconduct case, then within 30 days of a final disposition, then you'll be required to update the post. So it will be a more real-time approach than rather reporting at the end of the year, here's the cases that we have and the disposition. So again, we're still learning about what is that going to look like with what forms the BCA or post are going to provide to us. So we are in good shape with that, but we'll look to see if there's anything else we have to do. And then this, I won't read all of this, but there's a lot of legislative intent around the deadly force piece, right? So there was some changes to the language. So on the bottom, there's some previous wording there where when you're dealing with a deadly force situation, you're only justified in doing that. It's based on the totality of circumstances, and it's based on objectable reasonableness of another officer. So what's known to the officer at the time? What's going on? Why are they having to use deadly force? So the bottom line with deadly force, it's to protect the police officer or another from great bodily harm or death. And then they've added in these 3 additional points here, 1, 2, and 3. So an officer has to be able to articulate that very specifically. They have to be able to show that it's reasonably likely to occur absent any action from the officer. So great bodily harm or death is going to happen absent if the officer doesn't take action. And then it has to be addressed through the use of deadly force without unreasonable delay. So it's just happening right there in this rapidly
evolving situation, right? So officers are responsible to be able to articulate that. So that's what the bottom line is with there. So they kind of just changed some of the language, took that previous wording out and made it very specific as to what they are wanting documented. And just the level for which, when you're gonna have to use this kind of force, that you have to be very specific in what is happening and why it is that instantaneous decision. And another piece of the legislation was around grievance arbitration, so officer discipline, if there's actions coming up with grievances. This has changed a little bit. So the legislation changed to say that the commission, so there's gonna be a 6-person roster of arbitrators, and that, those will be appointed by the commissioner. And then the process before used to be there was like 6 or 7 arbitrators, and then each side could strike an arbitrator, and it would go back and forth, and then you would end on an arbitrator. So to try to look at maybe a better process, the commissioner is going to actually appoint arbitrators who have training now in this kind of disciplinary action, and then there isn't gonna be the strike process. It's gonna be, this is the arbitrator. So that's where that's gonna be changed. And that's kind of the high level. So there's a lot going on in there, but I think I hit on all the high points of the things, specifics that are really gonna be impacting us and the things that we have to come in compliance with. So with that, I know it was a lot, but I definitely stand for questions.
Yes, actually, mine is not a question, but a comment. So I just want to commend you and all of the previous chiefs and how we've gotten to this point where we have great policies already in place. And for the work that you're doing right now with our officers as we move forward through these difficult times, because it has been difficult for our officers. So please extend our sincere gratitude to the work that all of you are doing in this space. It's a difficult job, and you come to work every day knowing that you're going to be in a risk situation. But with the legislation that they've adopted, we have been practicing all of this that they're asking us to do. All you're doing in some of these incidents is putting in place a policy that you're already practicing. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Vince.
Thank you. I'd echo what Mayor said, and you know that, how I feel about this department. I'm beyond proud of this organization and everything that we do, and I can't say that enough times. And this just reaffirms it really, that this is all part of our day-to-day, that we're constantly ahead of the curve on things. One item that I think you were maybe looking for feedback on was the residency incentives. And I don't know if we want to jump into that rabbit hole right now, but I'll just say right now that I think that your hiring practice should be based on the best and the brightest, and not geographical. And if they do live here, that's great, but you have your hiring standards and what you're looking for. And I understand maybe what the intent was, but I don't ever want to limit your ability to hire who you deem as the best possible candidate.
And we have great hiring standards. That's why we have the group of people that we have in law enforcement here in Burnsville. So I don't ever want to see that diminished or reduced at any rate. Dan Gustafson.
I would echo what both of you had to say. As I recall, there was a time when I lived in Minneapolis. I think Minneapolis tried to do a residency requirement on their police officers that didn't go well. Mm-hmm. And when talking to several officers, it's like, it's difficult to be a peace officer in your town and then maybe have to call on your neighbor for a domestic dispute or something like that. And so I agree with you. Hire the best people, and if they live in town, that's great, and they want to live here and work here, that's great. But
that's a choice they make.
It's a choice they make.
Yeah.
I never want to see us in a situation where our officers need to live here or something like that, because it didn't work out years ago, I know, and I don't see where it would now.
The standards that we have in place now has to do with their skill sets, their leadership, and their character, and their who they are as people, and you take them through a psychological test. So, you know what, the standards that we have in place are really excellent, yeah. Kara?
Yeah, I do not agree with putting a residency requirement on there, nor would I even incentivize someone to move to Burnsville. Your hiring practices are excellent, and, you know, our city is fortunate to have had, oh geez, almost 50 years now of like a really good history of community-based and peace officer-based policing, you know, and it's back to the 70s, and it's also with us being one of the first ones to require a 4-year degree, and it's, you know, which was unheard of, and we were never gonna be able to hire anyone. And then, you know, also with being the first to adopt body cameras and, you know, and all of these kinds of things. So, as you've shown in the presentation, we're on the right track, and we have a good history of that, and we have that embedded in our culture. So, no, as far as the specific question on residency requirement, I see that as a non-issue, so thank you.
Thank you.
Melanie?
I have a comment, but I will forego it for tonight, so.
Well, now, do you get to say it before or after Dan Keeley gets?
We'll defer to the council member.
I didn't push my
Oh,
button.
he didn't press it, but I knew that Melanie wanted to comment.
Push it.
So,
I'm good, I'm
you're
good.
good? Okay. Do you really want to comment, Councilmember Keeley?
Of course, we're talking about one of my favorite departments.
Because you know she has one more presentation to make.
I know. Well, I'm not going to repeat what the other council members have said. You know where I stand, supporting the men and women in blue in Burnsville. I think we're one of the standard bearers for law enforcement around the state. It was body cameras was another first.
Yep.
And I know that our neighborhood policing philosophy, our community-based policing philosophy goes way back, and it has served us very, very well. There's probably a lot of law enforcement agencies around the country that implore that, and you don't hear them in the news because they have the type of relationship with their community that doesn't have unfortunate issues pop up that we see around the country and in Philadelphia right now. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that, and when I see our men and women in blue at a traffic stop, or I drive by, I always wave, and interacting with people, you know, it just, and I've witnessed it. I've been, you know, many years ago, even after I first was elected, I was pulled over a couple times, and I was experiencing just really how professional and mutually respected they are.
I remember that.
Yeah. Wow, went a little fast a couple times.
And that's the
So-
one thing that you know, our men in blue,
Yeah.
men and women in blue, you're another person in a community, and
Yeah.
it's about safety, your safety.
Absolutely.
And other people's safety, so they don't look and say, oh, it's Councilmember Keeley.
No, they went, oh, goody. So just to summarize, Chief Schwartz, great job. There was very little that really had to change here because many of those things that were being addressed, we didn't do or already did. And really appreciate everything your department does to keep this city safe. And very proud to live in Burnsville and have Burnsville PD watching our back.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. We're going to the next one. She's,
And I just
Chief-
want to add, you know, staff they're really the workers behind all of this. They're the ones helping to look at all this legislation. So this is really a team effort. I know you know that, but I want to recognize them because it is a lot of work to go through these things individually and really just vet out what are we doing. And so I just appreciate the work that they do as well, so.
Well, Chief, it's your whole team.
Yes.
Your sworn officers and your administration folks. It's the whole team.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank
Okay, community engagement and mental health unit presentation. Chief Schwartz is going to tell us about what is going on in this space.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I mentioned this a little bit in my previous budget presentation as well, but got an overview for you of our community engagement and mental health unit, some of the foundation that we've begun to prepare for moving into this for next year. So I'll give you a little background, talk about our mission, our objectives around this, a little bit of our timeline and current workload that we've already started doing, some of the outcomes and the future plans. And just as I do talk about this, I'll say, you know, this work is really being done by Sergeant Max Yakovlev, who some of you might know, and our crime analyst Holly Helm have really been the force behind this, gathering this data, working together and doing this, you know, at the direction of all of us, just, you know, here's something we need to work on. So they've really done a great job. So just a little bit of the background as we've been talking, you know, Burnsville Police Department, the city of Burnsville, we have a long-standing history of really trying to introduce new and innovative ways, progressive ways to better serve the community. And so that's what this community engagement mental health unit is being created for, because we want to be able to better address the needs of individuals who are suffering from mental health and mental illness in our community. So this really aligns with our police department mission of working together to make a difference through excellence in policing. Everything that we work on is grounded in that. It also is aligning with our city values of innovation, collaboration, and excellence, and then aligns with the strategic priorities with the city under safety and community engagement. So really building blocks for what's, you know, what is our story and what is important to us. So I mentioned this earlier, but we're restructuring our community resource unit. So we just really want to keep the community engagement part, but we want to add in that mental health piece. And so we're not right now increasing staff, obviously, but we are sort of restructuring, moving responsibilities around so we can pull that piece in. And then just really continue to engage with the community on all those initiatives we work on with the city and all the things we're already involved with. So to keep the continuity of that, but add this in. So we've been looking at data on all of our crisis-related calls. We've been looking at follow-up, referral opportunities, and really just trying to identify who are the folks that we're having a lot of repeat calls to, and kind of just starting from there. Basically, you know, where's a starting point for us? So that was what the team was looking at. And then once we identify that, what are the problem-solving methods that we have to try to deal with this? Because again, we're trying to partner. We want to partner with Dakota County. We're partnering with their crisis unit. We're working with other mental health professionals. And, you know, it needs a coordinated response. This isn't just law enforcement's responsibility. Some might say law enforcement shouldn't have the responsibility, but we have no other mechanisms in place. And so we're the last line for people to call. And so we want to be able to do the best that we can with that. So that's why we're working on this. And again, this is going to start officially kick off in January. So the mission, as we look at what specific mission do we have for our mental health units, really to connect and respect and protect. And again, this is the work of Sergeant Yakovlev, and just really working collaboratively with the county resources, also with families, friends, people that are important to people that are suffering in mental health crisis. How do we engage these people so that we have the best possible outcome for that individual who is in crisis at that time? We want to work on decreasing that stigma of mental illness, chemical dependency, and homelessness that sometimes goes along with this, with mental illness. And then want to make sure we're providing that trusted service with dignity and respect, always very important. And we want to do that in all of our contacts, but call it out here especially because this is, you know, just an area where it's really, really important that people are maintaining their dignity and respect. And then also to decrease any conflicts that happen between law enforcement and folks that are experiencing a mental health crisis. So a lot to think about, but these are all things that are on our mind. And why they're on our mind is really because, you know, as you look at our trends here, there's a visual. We're looking at, in blue there, over the last 10 years, you know, our total calls for service, the percentages of those have remained relatively consistent. But you can see as we're tracking mental health calls for service, the percentages are going up. And so I'm nearly doubling. And so, you know, it's not working. What's what's happening right now. People are not getting the services that they need. And, people can talk about, well, this isn't our realm, this isn't this person's realm, and we can't afford to do that, because again, this is individuals in our community. So this is some of the data that we're looking at and saying, yes, this is where we need to spend our time. We need to put some resources here. We have to move forward. And then this is just some more data, some trends. So you can see on the chart there in the blue is just our calls for service regarding mental health and suicide calls or suicide attempts over 2020 up through October. And then on the right, you'll see that's a heat map. So if you kind of look for those red areas and orange areas in the middle there, kind of shows that's, hours of the day and days of the week. So when are we getting the most calls, generally speaking? And when we look at that, it can just help us deploy our resources in certain times or time frames, so we can look at, patterns in that and then get our resources during those times. Because maybe, you look at that and you go, well, maybe midnight, 1 in the morning, there's not as many things going on, 4 in the morning. But that middle of the day, right after work time, there's a lot more. And so let's have flexibility in how these folks can use their time and respond to these calls.
And if I may.
Yeah, Kara.
Could we have the slides available?
Yes.
And also, on the last slide, could we have a comparison of that to the previous 2 years?
A comparison of the calls for service?
Mental health?
Yes,
The mental
please.
health?
Yeah, just so I can kind of get an idea of
The increases?
yeah, the trending that we're starting to see. If that's possible, I would appreciate that.
From the past 2 years?
Yeah, thank you. I don't mean to interrupt,
Nope.
but this
Yeah.
is definitely, I would like copies of this. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, and so then objectives, as we again talk about this, we want to increase preventative response to those that are suffering with mental health. So how can we be more proactive? How can we look at prevention? We want to make sure we're increasing safety among persons that are dealing with mental illness and crisis, as well as officers that are responding out. And then we want to make sure that we're getting people diverted to the appropriate resources, so to mental health assessments or mental health treatments. And then we want to increase officer awareness, community awareness, and education around mental health and mental illness. And then really, the base of all this is really we want to increase those community relationships, and we want to increase the public trust. We want to be an effective police department. If we don't have these things, we are not going to be effective. So those are some of the objectives we're looking at to increase. And then as we look at what do we want to decrease, is obviously that the conflict that can happen between police and those that are experiencing mental health incidents. We want to decrease that as much as we can. Now, it's very difficult sometimes, but we have to think about ways that we can do that. And so when we're looking at these repeat calls for service, we want to decrease that, but we have to look at how we're going to do that. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more in the coming slides. But we also want to decrease the impact that mental health illnesses can have on the community. Because there are other areas, domestic violence, a lot of these other things that are happening in communities are happening, people are experiencing mental illness or mental health crisis, and then, there's domestic violence, or there's homelessness, or there's addiction, or there's other things happening. So all these things can really impact community neighborhoods as well. So we're hoping to see how can we decrease that. And then, just making sure, and I think we do a very good job of this in Burnsville, and I think police departments around the county do a good job at this as well, is that, you're not pushing people into a criminal process or a judicial system. You're looking at what is appropriate. Prison, is that not appropriate? You're looking at what treatments, what diversions, how do we decrease that? It's not to say that people that have mental health issues could never commit a crime, but is it appropriate? What else is going on? So looking at that total picture are some of those things we're looking at there. And then as we have talked about, and I've been talking with Sergeant Yakovlev and Holly, and we talk about, how do we want to, what's going to be different? What are we trying to do? And we talk a lot about this trauma-informed approach. And so to look when we go and we respond to individuals that are suffering in crisis, making sure that it's, we're responding and we're creating a safe space, right? So we want physical safety, we want emotional safety. We want people to have a choice in, if possible, in what's going to happen with them in their health care. Where do they want to go? What doctor do they need to go see? And so we really want to be collaborative. We want to work together. We want to share that power, like we're in this together, and help us help you get the care that you need. And so that could be working with families again, or individuals, neighbors, people that, sometimes people don't have people, or people that are willing to help them. And so it's the county services, it's us. But a lot of times we can pull families and friends and people into that to say, help us have a more coordinated approach. That trustworthiness piece, that's going to build on that. If we can be clear about here's what can happen tonight, here's what can happen in the future. And then talking about boundaries with people, and that some of that happens when it's like, if you're calling 911 for every single thing, but you're not really in a crisis or what else is going on, there's some education there, like boundaries between calling an officer 100 times a day. Let's think of another plan. What can we do to do something different? And then really empowering individuals, again, in their total care and in skill building, or getting them the tools that they need so that they can make better decisions or feel more informed about, what's going on with them. I mean, that's the bottom line, is just trying to get them engaged in their own care. Take your medicines. Sometimes people refuse to do that. How do we, make plans and help people along this way? And we can't do it by ourselves. Again, you'll hear me say that all the time. But again, working with Dakota County Crisis, working with social services, working with other partners, that's really our goal. This just shows you guys a timeline. So we've been talking about this obviously for a long time, but really back in December of 2019, we started having discussions around mental health calls and just really feeling like, boy, there's a lot of mental health calls, or mental health calls increasing. And so we knew that, but we started looking at some of the data, and then we started contacting other agencies and saying, what is everybody doing in the county? How are you responding to this? And having those conversations, looking at different ways to do things. We started setting up record system flags in our own systems to communicate between officers on shifts, like someone responded to this call and here's what was going on with this person. So you get kind of a flag, or this person is violent, or this person is known not to take their medications, or this person likes it if you call them on the phone, or whatever information. So we started to look at how we could flag information. And then Sergeant Yakovlev and Holly were giving reports to myself and to the captains, the police administration. And then he actually started doing follow-ups via phone in April to just, was looking at those high consumer use calls and saying, okay, here's somebody that we've dealt with this many times. So I'm going to just reach out and call this person, do follow-up that normally wouldn't ever get done, and say a check-in. How are you doing? What's going on? So he began to do that over the phone in April, and then by June, he was starting to do that in person. And again, I'll just say, this was in conjunction with all of his other responsibilities that he has right now. So really doing a lot there. So as we get him into this other unit, there's going to be more time for him to do this. But so he started doing that in June. And by July, he was, talking with more, reaching out to NAMI, Minnesota, National Alliance of Mental Illness, and reaching out to other partners to kind of get that list like, hey, we're going to need help. So work through that. Also, of course, we work with our Burnsville Fire Department partners. This impacts them a lot. Transport holds, they're coming out, 911, transport hold, bring someone to the hospital. Literally, people are released in a couple hours because they can't be held, because maybe transport holds aren't written correctly, or they are not a threat to themselves, or not deemed to be a threat to themselves, or they make agreements like, I'm not going to harm myself, and so they're released. So we see that quite a bit. And so that brings us up to where we are, where we're like, okay, let's start doing this. Let's really put energy towards this, and let's see what we can do to help people in our community. So that's where the work is coming with mental health. And then this just gives you another visual, again, of cases over 2020 in the blue, and then when the follow-ups started and how many follow-ups were being done sort of each month as we've gone along here. And so really from January to October this year, we've had about 590 cases. Those are all mental health crisis calls, suicides, and suicide attempts. And then so far, we have reviewed, followed up in some way, 261 of those cases. And again, there's some man hours into that. And then the 34 cases are really, those were cases Max also actually responded to while he was on patrol. So had actually responded to because he got called there, and then he was also doing the follow-up because, you know, he took the initiative to do that.
Yeah.
Just a quick highlight, as we're working with the mental health unit, some things we're thinking about, of course, is always making sure our officers are trained in mental health and crisis intervention training. We're all going through that. We have been doing that for a long time. And then getting access to the officers for information on contacts in the community that they can also contact when they're out, when they're on a first response call, a 911 call to something, making sure we're communicating between the mental health unit and the frontline officers. Here's information that can be shared to get people through whatever they're going through, and then we can start that follow-up work. And then we're working towards developing systems and ways officers can track information, get information at the time, so then work can be done further with the mental health unit folks. So we're still working on that. That's one of the things we really want to get after. We do collect a lot of this data normally when we go, but we haven't really been coordinated, and this is going to the mental health unit for review. And then what is our process going to be for trying to help folks? So we want to really collect demographic details. What's the reason for the crisis? Who are family? Who are friends? Who are important people? Caseworkers, doctors, probation officers, whatever it might be. Is there use of drugs and alcohol, weapons? Obviously, that changes scenarios on responses sometimes. And then are there officer safety notes that we can put out as officers are, again, responding to calls? Because there's just a lot of shift changes, so not everybody always knows we were just out here again yesterday. They wouldn't necessarily know that. So, and then we can use that data to follow up. So Max and his crew will be able to follow up, and then we'll go from there. So that's something we're still developing. Holly's working on developing that. And I think she's very excited about it. She's doing a lot of work around it. I think we're going to have a good product there. And then what we're trying to really get after is what are the priorities to decide this call, this case, this individual needs more attention right now. And so we look at, is this person been threatening or engaging in violence with anybody that was on the scene at the time or anyone in the community, or what's going on there? Are they suicidal? Have they been mentioning suicide? Have they developed a plan? Have they tried suicide? You know, what are their methods? Are they talking about it like they're going to do it? And then are they high utilizers? So how many times have we been responding out to the same address, to the same type of incident? And those can help us then prioritize, okay, we're gonna need to do a more individual approach and follow up. Because with everything, we have to try to prioritize it. Because we want to decrease that volatile situation as much as we can. So I'm going to share just a couple case studies really quick, and then we're close to the end. But one of the things, one case study in particular we've been working on, or that Max and Holly have been working on, is an individual who had called 911 73 times between January and April of this year. So called 911 that many times, and then 69 calls to the non-emergency number. So a lot of calls, and these were mental health, crisis calls, assaults, and so this was a high utilizer. What we knew about the individual is they had a traumatic brain injury, they were not compliant with taking their medications, and they were refusing help from social services. So if they're refusing help from social services, they're not getting any county resources, so then they're just calling us. And so in April, there was an intervention where Max had made contact with this individual and developed a rapport and said, you know what, call me, let's schedule weekly appointments to talk, because it wasn't rising to a level where there was an emergency response needed. And so they scheduled those, and they did that for a while. And then that information was shared with officers, so anytime if we got a 911 call, that could also circle back to Max, and he could get in contact with this person and say, remember to call me, and here, you know, we can talk through things. So the outcome for that right now, again, they created a plan together, so there's that individual plan on how can we, you know, manage this. And so he was getting calls multiple times a day, but it was reducing, you know, those 911 emergency response calls, which, you know, makes the ambulances more available, which makes officer response more available, because we have everything else too in the city that we have to respond to. So obviously we can't do that forever, just have
someone calling Max, you know, but that's what's working right now. And then we can work with Dakota County, we can work with their stabilization unit, and then we can look at, okay, what else can we do with this person? Sometimes a civil commitment is sometimes needed to help this person get on track with, okay, you need to, or take your medications, or you need to do these certain things. So, right now, they're just still really working together with the county.
Yeah.
And, it's
Chief?
improving.
Last year, did you not also contract with a social worker?
That was the, so the county has a social worker. We did apply to try to get
Yeah.
into a program with the county that was providing coordinated mental health response. And they had a pilot that was initially with West St. Paul and South St. Paul, and they shared a social worker through Dakota County.
Okay.
The county had agreed to fund another social worker, and so we did apply to do that, and based on a lot of information here that I'm sharing with you, but we didn't get selected for that. So, I believe it was Rosemont and Apple Valley got selected for that. And so that's why we thought, okay,
Did they have more calls than us?
I don't know how they decided on that, decision. I didn't have everything on what their calls were.
Because
Maybe
there
they-
were some reports that I looked at, and we have the most cases that go to court than either one of those two cities.
Okay, yeah, well, just,
Called
yeah.
Drosty.
Yeah, could be. But, so I think the bottom line is, we understand it's a resource that, everyone wants a social worker to work with their, and so that hopefully down the road, maybe the county commissioners will decide, hey, we were gonna add some more social workers.
Yeah.
If any of them are out there listening, maybe that's,
Yeah.
something that the county could
Yeah.
help us with. But, so no, we didn't get that.
Yeah.
But it was just, we had to come up with a different approach then. We couldn't just say, okay, we didn't get this, so we're just going back to what we've been doing. We're
So
trying
you
to
tapped
do
Max.
something different. Yeah, yeah. And Max really, this was a passion of his to
Yeah.
work with, and so again, has really done a lot of work there. And then just lastly, this case study, the second one, we were looking at a person that had 11 calls for service between 2018 and 2020, so not as many, but these were more disorderly, more checking the welfare, more crisis-related, and potentially dangerous. So it kind of rises up on the priority level. This person had serious and persistent mental health, a diagnosis, so we can gather that information from Dakota County Social Services. There was 7 calls that resulted in transportation to a hospital, and then the individual had a history of violence with family members, so family members are calling us. There was an intervention on the 25th where officers had responded out and the individual was placed on another hold. They were not taking their medications, they're laying out in the middle of the parking lot, obviously not safe, they hadn't slept in a long time, and so that information again was being shared between Max and our officers, our frontline folks. And then Dakota County has a stabilization unit, so a little bit more intense resources that can be used there in situations like this. So that's, because of the work that Max was doing with this individual and Dakota County, this person was able to get into this program, or they're working with them more closely. So that's a win in my book. And then we'll continue. We still have calls for service, but we have a more intentional response. We understand and can communicate the information that we have, and again, be more coordinated in that. And then lastly, just a little bit of our vision moving forward. I think I talked about all of this, but it's really around that, how we're gonna gather the data. So Holly's working on creating that database, and it'll be looking at data entry, what patrol officers can gather for us at the scene at the time, and then getting that information back to the community engagement and mental health group, so. And then hopefully down the road next year, we'll be able to report to you some more on this, what our findings have been, what we've done, what's working, maybe what's not working, and then share that with you and our other county partners, so. And with that, I would stand.
Actually, thank you very much, because what you're giving us is you're giving, like in your case study, where or else the heat maps, where you're at, and because of having Max work with it, you can see the reduction.
Right.
Yeah, so it's making a difference. So thank you for being forward-thinking and addressing the mental health issue with intention and with kindness. And So, and honoring the human dignity. And one of the things that I kept hearing you say is that a lot of them get into this space because they don't take their medication. And then they're in trouble, then they're at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you again for everything that you and staff are doing. And thank Max.
I will.
I remember when he also got into making sure we didn't have graffiti in Burnsville, and
Yes.
and he worked.
He's a busy guy.
Yeah, I mean, God, he just goes after things, and
That's right.
and he gets results.
Yes.
I remember when trying to eliminate gangs, and he went after that.
Yep.
So thank Max.
I will. I will.
So, Gustafson.
Chief, that was a really good presentation. You had my attention the entire time on it. But more importantly, I was sitting here thinking about, it's amazing what we're doing as a small town department. I mean, we're not Minneapolis or St. Paul, and the resources we're putting into this, which I think are so important today. Congratulations on that. It's really important.
Yeah.
I've worked with the homeless for quite a few years now, and I see it when I used to go to the Matrix shelters and that, and talking to different people, and a lot of the homeless do have some mental health issues. And so it's good to see that we as a city are dealing with people in a very humane and respectful way, and we seek to get them help instead of just using the jails and that to put them there, and they'll take care of it when they get there. So kudos to you and your entire group here, because it's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Keeley, Dan Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Outstanding. This is, I don't know how many departments are taking this kind of initiative with mental health, but this is an incredible amount of work in an area of specialty for a law enforcement officer, to make those phone calls, to connect, to essentially be the counselor, the therapist in a way, to help a person get to a better place. And, we've always known that law enforcement officers are put in those positions when they go on calls, but this is a whole different level of support and reaching out and supporting the community. So fantastic work. I think this officer deserves a lot of commendation for what he's doing. It's great. I think it goes beyond what, the spirit of that legislation and trying to give mental health training. He's taking it a step further.
Well, follow-up calls. To talk to them.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah. Vince?
Just echo what's already been said, and obviously this is probably the biggest issue of a generation right now, and I feel honored to be present at the inception of this program, because it feels like it's going to be something special. So thank you for doing this and letting me kind of participate.
Max is a very special person too. And if you know his story.
Yep. Got a
He's
good
a
story.
very special person.
Maybe you'll be sitting there someday.
He might be. Hopefully he's listening in and
Yeah.
hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Melanie, is there anything else?
I think we've covered it all, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor.
It's
I don't
been-
have anything
yeah.
else tonight.
It's been great, it's been
Maybe I could come
wonderful.
up with something
It's only
if
three
you
and a half
wanted.
Yeah,
hours.
so-
Can we get it to
Dan gets
four?
the last word in this, doesn't he?
Yeah, so I want to thank you, Melanie.
Motion to adjourn.
In leading the team and the things that we've heard tonight, and really making sure that our vision, our values, our strategic direction is knitted into the fabric of the organization and how everybody is working towards it. Just listening to your report, Chief, on each and every one of them, of the mental health and also the legislation and how you're addressing that internally. But I heard it from everybody else. So Melanie, Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for each of the members of the departments and their leadership in all of this. So thank you so much. Anybody else have anything else to say? With that,
Motion to adjourn.
I would like to wish my wife a happy birthday.
okay. Happy birthday.
Should we sing her
Jackie.
happy birthday?
Yeah.
Probably
And-
sleeping.
You gonna sing to her?
Yeah.
That would
No,
ruin her birthday.
Let's do it now.
Yeah, okay, we are adjourned by acclamation.